Then we are down to 1.2. Karen will call it, or no, 1.3, review of August 24th, 2022 workshop notes.
Second,
I'm sorry, who motioned?
Garcia
Nancy.
Guillen.
And Alicia?
Yes, ma'am.
You don't have to approve them.
Yeah, you don't
just
have to approve
reviewing
them. You don't, yeah, you're
They'll
just
be on
reviewing
the-
them.
You don't, because you don't
It's
have
a
to
no
approve
vote.
your minutes from the work session. You just review them to make sure they're correct.
2.1, strategic plan. Dr. Farmer.
All right, and Chairman, if it's okay,
Sure.
I'm gonna just tee this up just a little bit for our Board of Trustees, Chairman O'Connell, and trustees of the board and members of the JJC community. There are socks for sale. Just wanted to get this
Foundation's gonna love you.
foundation plug in before I return to serious mode. They're Hawaiian print. That is all I'm gonna say.
You have a free pair to give
But
away.
there are many, well,
You have extra pairs.
that's true. That's true. I've invested in a collection. They are for sale to support the incredible work that the foundation does. And many of you know, or perhaps you don't, but we've set a goal of awarding $1 million in scholarships, and your contributions and your support of, we'll call them the Hawaiian socks, will go a long way toward that effort. And as a reminder, Wednesday, February 15th, which is our next regularly scheduled board meeting, is Sock Day. So,
I'll let you know, I already own 2 of them.
thank you, Trustee
Yes,
Mahalik.
yes,
I
and look,
appreciate that.
I have
Hey,
mine too.
Okay, all right. Thank you, trustees. I really appreciate that. So I want to tee this up, and I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Farmer here, who's going to introduce our partners as it relates to the development of our strategic plan. But I want the trustees to know that, from my standpoint, where I sit in the organization, that JJC is positioned to thrive. We are poised to do big things, and we continue to occupy a strong financial position. So my hope is you'll feel that, you'll sense that after the 3 presentations we've prepared for you today. Now, running a huge organization like JJC comes with certain challenges, and you'll hear about those today as well. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Dr. Farmer to tee up the strategic plan.
Thank you, Dr. Namuo. And once again, good evening, Chairman O'Connell, trustees of the board and the JJC community. I am actually very excited to share our strategic plan process with you this evening. As you know, our current strategic plan will sunset in July of this year, and we have contracted with Campus Works, a wonderful partner. I'm looking at them saying hello once again, to serve as our partner as we build a new strategic plan. So during my last update with the board in May, we made a commitment to you. We made a commitment that we would not move forward with our strategic plan until we hired a new president. And once again, look at Dr. Namuo, he's here. Thank you. And let me tell you just a little bit about Dr. Namuo, if you do not know this. He is truly a visionary leader. He has already set the stage for the strategic plan. And under the umbrella of growth, institutional growth is very important to him. He's already provided clear examples on how he's moving forward as the president, as a visionary leader. 12 by 12 by 12, that's one example, correct? Online learning, right, Dr. Gray? We're definitely expanding in that area. And he truly continues to believe that JJC should continue to be embedded in the community. And so I know with 100% confidence that we will continue to work in partnership with Campus Works and really build a collaborative strategic plan, really making sure that we include our external and also our internal partners. So this evening, I have the pleasure of introducing 2 wonderful partners who I've already enjoyed working with, Dr. Kirsten Hunter and Sandy Holt from Campus Works. I'm going to have them come to the podium at this time. Dr. Hunter and Sandy have been here, including Dr. Samantha Kelzer, have been on campus already this week. We had a very successful kickoff. They did a wonderful presentation on trends in higher education and the student experience. We had over 330 participants already who participated in these sessions. So at this time, I would like to invite them to the podium to tell us a little bit more about Campus Works and our process moving forward. Sandy?
Thank you so much, Dr. Farmer. It's such a pleasure to be here. We're so grateful to Dr. Farmer, Dr. Namuo, Board of Trustees. Thank you so very much. We're very grateful and we're excited to be working with your campus internally, externally, and the community that surrounds Joliet Junior College. Campus Works is an organization that is solely focused on higher education. We are here to help colleges and universities reach their full potential, as well as ensuring that your students also reach their full potential. And we do that by partnering and assisting with things like strategic planning, also helping to identify the student's journey along the way and helping you improve processes in that respect. Also getting the most out of your enterprise systems, as well as ensuring that your technology is also very well staffed and can move forward. So we really, really like to dive into helping you optimize and transform your institution to meet those strategic goals and objectives that you have. My name is Sandra Espinosa-Holt, and I'm Vice President of Partner Development for Campus Works. And if I had to summarize my experience in higher education, it's in enrollment management, institutional advancement, and Hispanic initiatives. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Dr. Hunter, who is going to give you a little bit more information on what we are doing with the strategic planning and some timeline information and what we've been doing thus far. So, Dr. Hunter.
Good evening. Chairman O'Connell, Board of Trustees, Joliet Junior College, and all of your surrounding community. Thank you for having us here. As Sandra said, and as Dr. Farmer alluded to in our nice welcome to the campus and to this meeting tonight from President Namuo. What we have been talking about on the campus for the past 3 days with my colleagues here. So Dr. Samantha Kessler is the other individual that you see on the slides here. What we have been able to do so far has been really to take a student-centered approach to thinking about strategic planning, which as a higher education institution, you would want to make sure that that student journey, the student experience, and student outcomes are really what are motivating the college's thinking and directions for the next 3 years for this plan. Wanting to make sure that we have an inclusion and equity focus to the conversation, knowing that all of your students are having an experience that is qualitatively similar, that the students are also able to quantitatively develop themselves, and that shows up in the college's outcomes too. So when we're working toward the strategic plan over the next few months and really articulating what's the direction, how are we capturing that growth mindset and that growth motivation, making sure that we have measurable outcomes that you know you want to achieve, that we're basing the strategic plan on, that data-informed understanding of the college right now, and that we're articulating where we go in that way so that you know that this plan is something measurable, that we know that we have milestones along the way. So what you see on the slide here are really characteristics of our philosophy of strategic planning, how we work with campuses, and qualities that you'll be able to look for too as you see drafts of it and when you vote on it in the months to come. High level right here, kind of what are we doing over this semester? Looking at a plan that has just wrapped up, looking at the outcomes there, and Dr. Farmer's been trumpeting those to the campus right now because there has been a really solid foundation laid from the past plans efforts already. Again, we're articulating that we're developing a 3-year strategic plan, so the year is covering 2024 to 2027. We did an all call to campus, so who was formed to be on the strategic planning committee. We have representatives from faculty, staff, administration, and other constituents will come into play in conversations as we go through various activities in the planning process. Not surprisingly, you should see the emphasis here: institutional growth, community engagement, and student success. Very clear goals to get behind, and what we'll do in the planning process is take note of technology shifts in your demographic. What's the landscape here post-pandemic, and specifically in the 2-year college, what are your goals here? And what do you need to be setting up students for when they walk across the stage, finish their certificate, or just know that it's my time to transfer right now. We get to that place of having those conversations and those answers over really the next 4 months. We're doing a lot of this work. My goal that I've been working back from with Dr. Farmer has been your May Board of Trustees meeting. So that May 10th date, to know that that will be a time where what you'll be presented with to review is the strategies, the objectives, and the measurable components of the plan. Beyond that, I'll still continue to work with the campus, but that will be on departmental planning, and that can come back to you as FYI. We can work through that. What your campus and what you as Board of Trustees expect, the difference between the strategies, the directions, the institutional commitments versus how departments will go about that work in their implementation plans. What Dr. Farmer was explaining in the beginning, over the past couple of days, that we've had some really energizing conversations in a trends in higher education workshop, a lot of community and a participant engagement there, and a student experience workshop. And I'll just close by describing the reason for the student experience session. And we did one with employees yesterday, and then another one with students today. And that's really to signal, but then also demonstrate that we have a commitment to wanting to use the student experience really as a guiding star and a compass for all of the planning work. So getting the understanding of what do we want the campus to look like? What do we want the campus to support? And really qualitatively hearing from students too, what do we want the experience to feel like for them? We got a lot of wonderful feedback. You have an inspiring campus here. The very positive experience that students have had showed up in conversations, and what the staff and employees want to be able to support on the campus too is really providing a nice foundation for a solid planning conversation over the next few months. So we look forward to bringing you a plan for the May 10th meeting, and to be able to talk through questions and comments then as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Will you give us any of the feedback that you got then from the students and the employees? Because I think that's critical for us to at least hear and see, because all we hear is that you got a lot, but we don't know what a lot of it was. And it would help, I think, all of us when we're assessing, where we're going to progress. And when you identify other constituents, I would hope you include the board when you say other constituents, because I see a failure of not seeing the board involved in it, which we're the ones that do vote on it and approve it. So if we could have that added to it.
Yes, and of course, the board will be involved in the process. We just wanted to share a very high level of the process moving forward. But trust me when I say we will make sure we embed an opportunity for the board to share, especially when we start having conversations about the mission and the vision of the institution. We will need to hear your voice and your input as we move forward.
And do you have the committee that you have a committee, a planning committee?
We sure do.
So would you have a board member or two on that committee then?
Well, that's definitely a conversation I can have with Dr. Namuo, and we will follow up regarding that request.
That would be good. Thank you.
No,
Thank you.
Kirsten and Sandra, thank you for the report tonight. On the committee, is there a student representative on the committee?
We are in the process of selecting a student to be a part of that committee. Yes.
Perfect. Sounds good. Thank you very much. I want to get their input too, so thanks.
Any additional questions from the board this evening?
Thank you.
The only thing I'm going to mention is you're doing it in May. Be prepared, because we have an upcoming election and there is a chance of a new member, so I think that we need to be aware of that and inclusive to help them understand the nomenclature that you're going to be using when you do the presentation. So just as an aside, and I know Dr. Namuo will do an orientation with the new member, but I'm just saying that we need to be aware of that.
Okay.
Duly noted.
We're
Thank you.
aware.
All right. Thank you very much.
Take a moment to thank our partners at Campus Works and thank Dr. Farmer for leading this effort. This week was energizing, kind of connecting. I was in Morris and connected into the initial session, felt all the energy, both virtually, and I understand there was a lot of energy in the room. The second session that day was just as fun and as engaging as you asked questions. and people in the audience responded, and their responses were projected on the screen in real time. So, just kudos to you, and look forward to the finished product, and we will absolutely keep the board apprised along the way. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Good night. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
2.2 is three-year financial plan budget update.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to invite Karen Kissel, I don't know if she can claim to be new anymore. At what point are you no longer new?
30 days.
30 days.
We were just having that conversation because the newness was extended to VP Valadez a little bit longer. I don't understand.
That's true.
I don't understand. He is.
He is. So the trustees are going to get a first look at the state of our finances at JJC, and just want to give credit to the executive leaders of the organization and the board of trustees. The state of JJC's finances, as I alluded and referenced in my opening remarks, are strong, and we're poised to do some big things and have the resources to do so. However, we did not get to this point by accident. It's sound fiscal management and standard practices that have been employed year over year that got us to this strong financial position, and we intend to continue JJC's history of conservative projections and sound fiscal controls and management. So with that said, I'm going to invite Karen, and Karen's brought a friend. Karen, take it away.
Before I introduce Jeff and have him come up and just continue the conversation, what we're going to do is we're going to go over fiscal year 23. We're going to give you an update. We're going to talk about the assumptions we used when we built our FY 24 budget, and we're going to walk you through that. We're going to give you a 3-year look forward. This is a presentation you're used to seeing, and then just talk about timeline, when we're going to engage the community, when we're going to be back in front of you to have a larger discussion. So without further ado, Jeff.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Just to give a brief kind of recap of where we stand for the current fiscal year, now that we're a little over halfway through. On our tuition revenues, we're very close to making budget. We're only about 1,500 hours short on the education fund side, which is about 175,000. I know there's more kind of late start classes and stuff, so time will tell over the next couple months, but we're very close. State revenue, we were very conservative kind of when we built the budget. The governor actually increased kind of the allocation to higher ed from what we were expecting. So our combined budget or actual allocation was 8.9 million. So it was about 800,000 over what we built our budget on. Property taxes, as referenced, I guess about 3 months ago when did the tax levy for the current year, new construction was coming in a little higher than what we built our budget on. So that'll be expected to be slightly over budget. I will not have final numbers on that till I start getting levy edit reports in April. And interest income. This is one item that when we built the budget, the feds have raised interest rates a lot over the last 6-7 months. That we went from getting 20 or 30 basis points to 3 or 4%. So as we start adding them into the projections, it really helps kind of cover up where we kind of balance this past year budget with the CARES Act funds.
We don't know how long this increase in interest income is going to last. So we're doing everything in our power to try to make investments 1 year, 2 year, 3 years out to take advantage of higher interest rates. But it's something we can't look to for 2, 3, 4 years ahead and factor this in. This is maybe a once in a 15-year. We're not sure, but we're looking through it. We're managing it, and we're trying to make sure that at the end of this year we don't have a cliff where we have a reduced interest rate.
Yeah, basically right now we're trying to get investments out in the 2 to 3 year range. Once you get out past that, rates kind of drop off again. It's kind of an inverse yield curve right now. On the expense side, especially the salaries are kind of running considerably under budget just with all the vacancies the college has in trying to hire. Adjuncts, faculty overloads in total, we're currently trending under budget. Kind of came off COVID with especially a lot of labs where you had to go to a really small class size as we've kind of reverted back to normal class sizes. That's helping from what the budget was based on. On the flip side though, we're starting to see an uptick in kind of, especially our medical claims since the college is self-insured. Especially lately it's been trending over budget. I guess time will tell over the next few months where we're going to end up, but that is trending over. Contractual supplies, utilities, travel, we're trending under budget. A lot of that's travel, utilities. We have a very favorable contract, especially on the electric, but that will be coming up. We got to go out for bid here, or we're in the process of it. Electrical rates are going up considerably from what they have been.
We've also had some unforeseen mechanical failures. We voted on a $100,000 expense for the line feed that goes into the G building, but there's been about another $100,000 worth of mechanical failures that we've had to cover this year, which was unanticipated. So we'll be seeing those coming forward soon, those expenses.
So far, we've been kind of absorbing them, and we've kept our contingency that we budgeted in the Ed and the O&M fund intact. As we look forward to next year, projected revenues in total, about a $6.3 million increase over the current year budget. State revenue, looking at a similar for our base operating and our CTE, 9.7 million. It's kind of one of those, our paid credit hours are kind of decreasing some because the ICCP primarily uses a 3-year look back, but we're trending the same as the whole state. And they kind of factor in, they'll use the same funds and kind of allocate them. So the rate per hour kind of goes up then. So we kind of left that in total the same. Tuition revenue, basically budgeting kind of flat funding or flat enrollment, or not flat enrollment, flat tuition rate, no fee increase. We are factoring in a 1.5% enrollment growth into the numbers.
I just wanted to add a little bit more on the tuition and fee rates, if at all possible. We've had some significant conversations in cabinet about tuition and fees. We've looked at our tuition and fee rates compared to other institutions. We're both on a CFO listserv with all the community colleges, and they've been submitting tuition and fee increases and sharing it with the community. And what we've seen is of the 39 institutions, 11 who've reported so far, 10 of them are reporting tuition increases, some as high as $10. So we're proud in the fact that because we've had good fiscal management, we are not going to be asking for a tuition or fee increase at the February 15th meeting. Instead, we're going to be presenting you with a board action item that says we're not asking for a tuition and fee increase. We're also looking at modifying some fees for courses. The music fee is coming down significantly, and we're looking at differential tuition specifically in the culinary arts program, and we're going to be changing that. We're going to be presenting that to you to change it from a differential tuition, which is about $160 to the traditional tuition rate, which is $116. So we think this is all great news for our students and for the college. So you'll be looking forward to seeing that on February 15th.
On property taxes, in total about 64.7 million. The operating funds, similar numbers kind of to prior year. New construction, about 300 million in our district, which would be about a 1.2% increase. Consumer price index for last year was 6.5%. Under the property tax extension limitation rules, we're capped at a 5% increase. But right now in the projections, factoring in capturing that to be a 6.2% increase to our property taxes, which would be about $3.8 million. And then we're budgeting about $2.5 million for interest income next year from what we got invested, kind of the longer term stuff locked in at the 3 to 4%. On the personnel side, there's increases factored in. It's kind of a little bit pending a lot of union negotiations going on or starting up right now.
We have 4 unions. We have the faculty union, we have the police union, we have the facilities union, and then we have food service. So there's 4 unions that are pending right now. And we also have the task commitment that we made to that union that we were going to review salaries and, we were going to take action if need be. So we're trying to factor that in as we look forward and build what we believe to be a conservative budget for FY24.
Kind of on the benefit side, which is primarily health insurance. Right now, the projections have a 6% increase, almost $950,000. But like I said, it's looking maybe that I'm a little too low on that percentage increase. Material supplies contractual, we are looking at factoring in primarily an inflationary increase. We're starting to see the pressure, especially on the supply side of the 5%, so 400,000. And then utilities, about 10% or 300,000. And that's focused more so on what we expect the electric rates to go up with the new bidding.
And then we added another budgetary line item called new initiatives. And this is specifically to address the strategic plan. As we heard, the strategic plan is going to be finalized sometime in September. We're going to already be into the fiscal year budget. So we wanted to set aside $1 million for big ideas, for strategic ideas. At the same time, we're going to be having the branding study. We want to make sure that we have monies available to address whatever strategies and ideas come forward that we think would be great initiatives for the college. So we want to have monies available to do that in this operating budget.
But just to kind of recap the assumptions that I went through for 24. And then as you roll that out into 25 and 26, similar percentages on construction, kind of assume inflation decreases back more in historical trends. Credit hour growth, we factored in 1.5% each year. Like I said, salaries a little bit to be determined. We had factored in benefits, kind of the historical trend of 6%. And then kind of other, which is that supplies, contractual, that's kind of mirroring kind of the inflationary. And then factored in a smaller increase in the out years, not knowing what some of the utility costs will be. And then referencing that new initiative that was built in. So for the numbers, as we look forward right now for 24, we're basically balanced for what's in there. We do start to show a small deficit for 25. Some of that's going to be, it doesn't take a whole lot of change in some assumptions. If the governor actually does increase funding for higher ed, which I have a feeling it probably will, but some of that could get covered. Where it starts to get a little tougher is once you get out 2 years out into 26, because there's no tuition increase factored in across any of the 3 years right now. So, that's where decisions are pointing to that it's, is it other revenues? Is it enrollment growth? Is it a tuition increase? Is it resource reallocation? Trying to think, was there something else when we were going back and forth on it?
Oh, sure, I can. So as we look at the calendar going forward, today we're presenting you with our 3-year financial plan. On February 15th, we're going to present you with the tuition and fee recommendations that we just talked about. On February 16th here on campus, we're going to have a budget kickoff. So we're going to start our own kickoff here on campus. On April 26th, we're going to have another workshop with you where we're going to just dive into the budget a little bit more so you can get a look at it. We're going to ask you on May 10th to adopt a preliminary budget. And then on June 14th, we're going to ask you to adopt the legal budget. Does anyone have any questions for us?
I do.
Yes.
In regards to, you talked about the things that came up that were, the contingency of things that needed to be repaired, replaced. Do we have a 10-year plan of the items that would need to be, that we could look at and see? It's usually developed by the architect that works with the 10-year plan to see what is needed, that's outdated, that needs replacing, so that we don't have to run into any emergency situations if we know the lifespan of the item is, passed, we could look at repair and replacement?
I guess I would say, pipe in if I'm saying this wrong. I mean, facilities always had a deferred maintenance plan. And we've, starting about 2003 or 4, there was a commitment by the college. And we've done a lot to maintain that and stay in front of the deferred maintenance. And we budget quite a bit annually out of our operating funds to go over to O&M restricted to put toward that type of maintenance.
Do we annually adapt and change and increase and add things, Patrick? Could you come up? Because you can't hear anybody on TV unless you're up at the podium.
Yeah, the spotlight.
Yes. The answer is yes. Every year we look at the entire campus. We evaluate all of our systems from top to bottom, and we do a 3-year projection, which the budget has been fabulous for us to stay ahead of our deferred maintenance. So the instances that Karen was talking about earlier were unforeseen. You can't predict a mechanical failure.
Mm.
So, a $10,000 mechanical failure here, a 10,000 there, it added up to 100,000. So we're in great shape here. I'll tell you that our heart and lungs are in fabulous shape at this college.
So we're good and we update annually then?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. And then you talked about the investment. What type of investments are we in?
We're primarily in treasury notes.
You're in treasuries. Okay,
Like
it's-
Bill's notes on the notes.
Okay, treasury. And then you talked about solar, our energy, our electricity and that. Don't we have the solar power that we put into place?
We do. What percent of that does it even supply? Small.
Small amounts, so we're not seeing anything beneficial?
Our agreement with the solar field is within 10 years, we own it. And so right now we're paying basically what we pay for our utility rate for our solar. So it's kind of a wash. But in 10 years, it'll be free power. So it's insignificant really in the total scheme of our electrical demand. It's probably 10% at the most.
Mhm.
So every little bit helps, I guess is what I would say. So right now we're paying the same amount that we would pay for our utility. So it's a wash. In 8 years, we will own it and we won't have that cost any longer.
Do we do anything because on the residential basis, we can do negotiations to get a price marked in for our utilities for gas and electricity. Do you guys do that for the school at all, that we get that?
I don't understand what you're asking me.
Okay, we're allowed on the residential side, ComEd and NICOR allow us to do where we can strategize to say we want this company and it stays this way for this long. And it's an agreement that we walk into if we choose it, or we can go directly with them charging us back and forth. So do we have that option of negotiating electricity and gas usage?
Yes, we actually work with a consultant that goes out and does our bidding for us. And so with electricity, we work with the South Metropolitan Higher Education Consortium. This year, there's 5 institutions of higher ed that are participating in this electrical RFP that's out right now. We will get our refresh in another couple days. And so we're negotiating. We had 9 different energy suppliers that put in their bids. And now we're isolating it down or narrowing it to just 2 that are the lowest. And we will this month or February, this month, we'll lock in at a really good rate. The best rate we can.
You do have the ability to do that. Okay.
Yes. And we do the same thing with natural gas.
Sounds good. Thank you. And the last question I have.
Yes, if I could, just while we're going to be locking in, we're coming off a 2-year contract, 3-year contract. That the cost per kilowatt was a lot lower than what it's going to be on.
Well, I'm sure it is. I'm sure there's going to be.
That's why there's the utility referenced increase in there.
Okay, that's understandable then. And then you have on here on your CPI, you went from 5 to 3 to 2. Why did you go from 5, 3 to 2 with this inflationary status that we have right now?
You're talking here, correct?
I'm looking at that one. You went from 5 to 3 to 2.
I guess trying to be conservative because that's primarily driving the revenue, the property tax number
Okay.
and the projections.
So you don't think we're going to have any problems with property tax? I mean, do you think we're going to see any more increases in property taxes? So that's why you're doing the 3 and the 2?
I've mirrored it, the property tax to the consumer price index.
Okay.
I think he's, what they always say, budgeting is you want to be very, very
Conservative.
conservative on income and very, very more.
No, I know. But that's why I was wondering why you didn't keep it at 3 and 3, because I was looking at the CPI, just leaving it 3 and 3, that would have stabilized in my eyes.
Oh,
That's where I was at.
I guess it was a bit of an argument. If you go back into the last couple of years, if you looked at kind of a 10-year trend on
I did, I
consumer
looked
price
at that.
index, it was probably not much over 2.
Yeah,
1.8 for the last 10 years.
Okay,
yeah,
actually under 2 then.
yeah. I was just wondering where you went with the 3 to the 2, so that's what I was asking. Thank you.
Could you quickly for that slide expand on what the others categories and expenditures entails? I was kind of listening in.
It's primarily contractual materials and supplies, travel, and there's a little bit of fixed costs in there, or what we categorize as fixed costs. It's primarily leases for copier equipment and stuff.
I was looking at it and I would expect it to mirror. So if you look at the consumer price index up top, it's 5% and 3% respectively. I would assume in the others category, it would be a 5% and then a 3%, but it's sitting at a 2%. It's just a little thing that I noticed is they're like, because to me, that would match inflation is what I would expect.
I don't disagree. It could have been something I updated one and didn't update the other. It's not going to be a big swing on the numbers. I mean, you're talking 6 or 7 million of our budget represents the other expenditures, so it's not a huge swing.
All right, cool. Just curious. Thank you.
Karen, you mentioned 4 unions. You said faculty, police union, food service, and who's the other one?
Facilities.
Facilities. I'm going to recommend that the administration really looks into how we can repurpose maybe this budget, because this board, I believe it was last year, just voted on a tuition increase. And if we're anticipating a 1.5% enrollment increase, that's going to level off if we keep raising tuition. That's our bread and butter is students. How are we going to continue to attract students if we're not accessible and affordable?
I don't think we're doing a tuition increase.
No. She said we would talk about it.
No, I
So-
think they signed that there's no tuition increase this year is what we said from the finance.
Right.
No increase.
No
Correct.
increase.
Yeah, that was
For 1 year. So if in the future, like, let's try to continue that trend of no tuition increase for the next couple of years.
If you remember what the projection looks like now and what we looked at last year, we were looking at heavy shortfalls for the next 3 years. We don't see those right now, but we made the tough decision back then to increase tuition.
Yep.
Had we not, the numbers wouldn't be what they are today. We wouldn't be looking at $36,000 surplus in 24 yet.
Correct.
So-
But if we also control expenses, we wouldn't be in that position.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So it's a double, it goes
is.
both ways.
We're with you. We're with you.
Thank you.
And in that finance committee room, there's a lot of talk on
Yep.
control. So
I'm sure. Okay.
these are all tough decisions, and we don't forget that vote last year. And since we're not going to forget the votes we took last year, if we go back to slide 2, when we look at the interest income, we really only looked at what we're getting with our current investments. Timing of the market right now is incredible because the rates are there for us. They will not last.
Nope.
And, Trustee Mahalik and I asked about the rates, and they did sacrifice a little bit of yield to get a longer term return and lock in a longer term return. But what I want to remind you of is we voted to reissue bonds back then. Same thing. The timing of that was incredible. If you took a crystal ball and said, this is the right time to do it, it was. Bond prices are almost double what they were when they refinanced at 2.8. Was it?
I think it was more like, I think we got around 2.5 all in.
So right now, municipal bonds are 4.5% to 5%. So kudos to them for doing that. They came to us and, asked us for that, and it was voted on. So we don't get to go back and applaud too often, but that's one we should applaud them for because that was a good move. Same thing with this interest income right now.
Right.
And I'm not mistaken, but we have to stay inside treasuries and Fed issued securities, don't we?
we're restricted under state statutes. I mean, we can do CDs. You end up either having to try to get collateral, or you have to do a whole lot of them because you're limited to, 250,000. So it's very restricted in what we can invest in. That treasury notes and bills are honestly the easiest we can do and do, $2 or $3 million chunks and try and ladder stuff out every few months. And right now, anything we're buying, we're trying to push out 2 to 3 years.
And I'm really excited to hear what you're doing with the differentiated tuition in the culinary arts. I know that we initially started that with certain careers or pathways because the thought process is that this career, once you complete this degree, it's going to get you a good paying job. But in case it doesn't, I mean, is culinary arts the only department we're doing that for right now, considering?
I think right now that's what we're discussing. Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
And Chairman, if I may, and Trustee Morales, your points are well taken. And just to share with all of the trustees of the board, when I started learning and kind of digging into our budget, I was convinced that we would be able to accomplish all of those big things I referenced earlier within the confines of our existing budget. And so I put a lot of pressure on Dr. Farmer and Karen and our financial leaders to make it so, and they did. So kudos to them and credit to them that we are not coming to the board with a tuition increase, and still will be able to accomplish some of the things that we're going to set out to accomplish under the growth umbrella that Dr. Farmer referenced. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
You guys are good?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
You guys are good. All right. 2.3, workday status.
Chairman, thank you so much. And before I invite Jim Sir up to the podium here, the board will recall that we made a commitment to do a presentation on the state of Workday, kind of where we're at, and give a detailed, transparent presentation to the board in terms of some of the challenges I referenced earlier. I appreciate the interest in this particular thing. ERP stands for Enterprise Resource Planning, but the E should really stand for everything because it touches all aspects of what we do. So there is indeed interest across the college and in the overall implementation, successful implementation of Workday. I want to give just a lot of kudos to everyone who's made this successful thus far. So I want you to sit back, stretch if you need to, because in regards to fulfilling that commitment to you all, we have more than a handful of slides. But I'm going to toss it over to Dr. Farmer. She's going to provide some guidelines in regards to, follow up to what I'm saying, but just commend the team for putting together this presentation. We got a preview of it. It is indeed comprehensive. So let me hand it over to Dr. Farmer. I know she has more to share.
And Dr. Namo, I think you shared it all already. So I just, and once again, just to reiterate some of the information you shared, we wanted to really honor your request because at the last board meeting, you had a lot of questions and concerns related to student phase 2 of the process of the project for Workday. And so Jim, Sir, and Jerome Gottlock have worked on this presentation. It's very comprehensive. For those who were a part of this process 2 years ago, I'm sorry, but some of this information we're going to repeat because we truly believe it would be beneficial for the collective board to hear this story and this journey again. And so at this time, I will invite Jim and Jerome to approach the podium. And again, a lot of information that we're going to share. So I have one request for the board to hold off all of your questions until Jim and Jerome have completed the presentation. I will take some notes as well, Dr. Namuo, just to kind of monitor the process a little bit. But at this time, Jim, sir, I'm going to turn it over to you for the introduction as well in the history.
Thank you, Dr. Farmer. Thank you, Chairman O'Connell. Thank you, Board of Trustees. Dr. Newell, for your interest. There's been a lot of questions and discussion since the last meeting, of course, on this topic. And we are happy to come back with comprehensive is putting it nicely.
Right.
Right. And so we appreciate your time, again, your interest, your patience as we kind of walk through our journey, and a journey that's been successful, very successful to this point. We're probably 60% live in Workday, and you'll see that as we kind of walk through the presentation this evening. So very quickly, our agenda tonight, I'll walk through a little bit of a historical perspective that will really kind of take us back to the beginnings of the inception of the idea of modernizing our enterprise resource planning technology and associated solutions here at the college. That really kind of gets back to 2015-16 at the inception of that idea. Jerome will then walk us through our vendor evaluation and selection process, as well as the current project status. And then I'll do a wrap up and next steps, and we'll have additional time for questions and discussions at that point. So Dr. Newell, as he likes to do, or sometimes does, he stole my thunder. But back in my MBA program, we had a professor that said, if you're going to use a 3-letter acronym, you need to explain what that acronym is. And so as Dr. Newell, he got it right, so we'll give him an A on that test. But ERP stands for Enterprise Resource Planning. What that means for us here at the college is 3 core components. So it's our finance system, our human resource system, and then, of course, the biggest part of our ERP technology and systems here at the college is our student system, of course. And we'll spend the majority of our time tonight talking about our student phase 2 implementation as part of our presentation. So when I was doing my research and kind of digging back through years of presentations and documents and information, I really found a great presentation that we gave as part of a all-campus open forum back in about February of 2017. And it really kind of summed up the history of our business case and why we started to talk quite a bit about modernizing our technology, our core technology here at the college. So we originally purchased and implemented DataTel Colleague. It is now called Ellucian, is the company that owns our Colleague system. That was back in 1988. So just 30, what is it, 32, 33, 34 years, 34 short years ago, we purchased our Colleague system. So at the time, again, this is back in just setting a time reference for you. At the time, the legacy technology was starting to show its age. It had not evolved to meet the demands of the institution and the students' needs, both today and into the future. It was starting to require many third-party integrated solutions and applications that were not part of our core student system, were not part of our core finance system, were not part of our core HR system. So we had to start to connect and bolt on all of these third-party applications, and more of those third-party applications were moving to the cloud. And when I say the cloud can be kind of a nebulous term or terminology around technology solutions. What that basically means for us is that the college did not host the hardware, the college did not host the software, the college did not provide the human staff and resources to support that technology here on campus. We pay providers to manage the hardware, the software, all of the people resources required to support, maintain, develop those solutions are not hosted here at the college. They are hosted in the cloud. At the time, getting timely, accurate information was challenging. Again, it was hosted by the college. Support costs were continuing to increase on an annual basis. And at the time, there was a lack of a clear roadmap from Ellucian on how they were going to modernize their technology solution and evolve it to meet the needs and demands of our students, of our workforce, of our community and our stakeholders, and of course, our students. The needs of the students were evolving at a rapid pace. They continue to evolve at a rapid pace. And we felt like back in 2016 to 2017, there was not a clear roadmap for how they were going to do that. There were a few other factors and things that were going on at the time. One is that we received a 2.1 million Title III grant. There was a lot of college and campus-wide conversation about how are we going to spend that $2.1 million of that grant money. At the same time, there was a big struggle to get data, timely, accurate data out of the college's systems. Not only the core ERP, but the integrated and associated third-party applications and solutions to get good data, timely data, so we could make timely, accurate decisions based on that data. There was a struggle college-wide, top to bottom, to get good data out of our systems. That was part of that conversation around receiving the Title III grant. Can we spend some of the funds to improve our ability to access data out of our systems? There was a rising cost and complexity of our core ERP and legacy technology at the time. The cost was going up every year. The complexity to manage and maintain that system and integrate it with other third-party, modern, cloud-based solutions continued to be increasingly complex, which led to increasing costs to the college as well. And at the same time, the last component of that is that modern student systems were starting to emerge in the marketplace and become and evolve to the cloud. And so that was a trend that we were paying attention to at the time. So it was a kind of a confluence of these factors that came together as to why we started to build a case for modernization of our core ERP technology here at JJC. So getting back to that time again, we were on the heels of the board adopting our 2016 to 2019 strategic plan. And so we had 5 goals that all kind of fell under the umbrella of student success. I know my peer VP, Roberto Valadez, will appreciate that even back in 2016, we were very much focused, of course, on student success under Dr. Farmer's leadership at the time. We had 5 goals: community awareness, educational pathways, improve internal communication, data, and then collaboration with employees in the community and our external partners was the 5 goals as part of that strategic plan then. We have been a long-term, 10+ years now, partner of Gartner. Gartner is probably the world's largest and foremost technology research and advisory company in the globe. $4 billion in revenues, work with businesses across 100 countries, and they do a lot of work in higher education as well. And so we rely on Gartner's research. We rely on their insights. We rely on their analysts. They put out higher education specific research on an annual basis that talks about the trends, not only the trends that are happening in technology, the trends that are happening in higher education, and how to execute operationally against those trends, strategies, and plans as an institution of higher education. And so we rely on that research as part of the strategies that we develop, not only for technology, but for the institution on the whole as well. So at the time, Gartner had published higher ed research on student systems. There were some key findings as a result, specifically based on student systems for higher education. Needed to support non-traditional students, mobile and social capability. New business models were emerging in higher education, reducing the institutional burden to sustain legacy technologies as well. Systems were highly customized, proprietary business practices, and higher education systems for more than a decade had become stagnant. And modern cloud-based higher ed student systems were starting to emerge in the marketplace at that time. So recommendations, again, that came as a result of that research: limit new investments in legacy systems, review your roadmaps, make sure that you have mobile social functionality, cloud delivery model, real-time analytics, okay, at all levels of the organization. Make plans to replace or upgrade your individual niche third-party applications that were legacy applications, on-premise applications as well. And then assess whether a cloud delivery model could give you a more predictable and even spending operational model as part of the college's overall budget planning process. You'll hear later in the presentation that with Workday, we negotiated a 10-year fixed cost for the subscription of Workday across all three of our modules. Again, part of that research by 2020, again, 3 years behind us at this point, but 1/4 or 1/3 of all higher education institutions will have committed to a student system replacement project. So we had come up with a proposal for the cabinet at that time to construct, we were calling them design teams. Dr. Farmer, remember that? We used to call them design teams. Design team was also a committee or a subcommittee. We were going to construct an RFP for ERP modernization. It was going to be representative of all college constituencies, facilitate and manage an RFP process for the modernization of our ERP environment, establish appropriate decision criteria and measurements, and then communicate and make recommendations to the President's Leadership Council as a result of that recommendation at that time as well. So the committee, of course, went about the difficult work of creating an ERP modernization RFP. It supported the strategic plan. It supported student success. It invited all prospective partners to propose solutions, both software and implementation. It also very much encouraged our incumbent partner and vendor, Ellucian, to propose as part of that RFP process as well. They were our incumbent. I think the feeling college-wide at the time is that they had a leg up being our incumbent partner here at the college, that they had a leg up. They had all the insight. We were a 26-year customer of Ellucian at that time. It allowed the college to plan and understand what that financial and economic impact would be. And then it also wrapped up an evaluation process that we conducted at that time. Workday invited the college back in 2015 or 2016 to be part of their Student Strategic Advisor program. So that was the very early days of Workday developing their student system and student product. We were invited to participate in that Student Strategic Advisor program so we could get a better understanding of how emerging student systems were evolving to the cloud, what functionality would be part of those cloud enabled student systems, and also be able to provide input into that process and development of the system as well. Some of the risks that we had identified at the time is that if we didn't embark upon this technology modernization, it would decrease our ability to achieve the goals of that strategic plan, inability to meet our data demands of our students, faculty, staff, and the institution, and then our incumbent ERP partner could force a migration path on the college to their next generation platform as well. Over time, increasing costs of available solutions in the market would put added financial burden on the college in what at the time was a very challenging economic environment. And the lack of availability of talent in the marketplace to support our legacy ERP environment was becoming very apparent and challenging for the college as well. So if I had to summarize the business case up, what were the catalysts for modernization at that time? They would be these 6 things before you hear on the slide. The emergence of modern cloud-based solutions, rising cost and complexity of our legacy ERP environment, the decline of availability of talent, the unquenchable thirst of data that was happening here at the college and is still happening today, the rapidly evolving higher ed landscape and the competitive environment, and then alignment with the college's strategic plan. That was kind of the core of the catalyst for our modernization of ERP and technology, again, back in 2017. So we went off with the president and cabinet's support to create an ERP RFP committee in March of 2017. On the slide before you, you'll see the members of that committee. I won't read all the names. We had co-chairs of that committee, which were myself and then Mary Beth Luna. It was very important that we had co-chairs and that we had someone from academic affairs that was a co-chair of that ERP RFP committee to make sure that we had the appropriate voices not only from a co-chair perspective, but you'll see with the folks that were on the committee, we had representative across the college from every functional area of the college, multiple representatives from academic affairs, multiple representatives from student development. We had representation from HR, from financial services, from institutional research, and other administrative support as part of the RFP committee as well. So in July of 2018, we released our ERP modernization RFP. We had 4 software providers that responded to that RFP: Ellucian, Workday, Campus Management, and Genzabar. We had 2 implementation partners respond: Navigator Management Partners, which is now AVAP, and Collaborative Solutions. At the same time, and this happened later in 2018, there was a lot of conversation happening on campus as part of the RFP process. There was a lot of passion across the college community in the RFP committee as well about the direction that the college should take relative to our evaluation that was happening in the RFP process. There was a lot of conflict. There was a lot of healthy debate. There was a lot of passion on all sides of the issue. What I can tell you is that there was a keen focus and passion on how best to serve students at the end of the day. So regardless of where your perspective was, regardless of what functional area of the college you represented, everybody at the end of the day came together to make sure that whatever we decided to do was in the best interest of the students. And I think that passion played itself out. I think that the process that we took allowed for all voices in all functional areas to be heard, to be listened to come to the table with concerns, with ideas, with questions, with scrutiny of both the process, of the functionality that we were seeing from prospective vendors, of the implementation methodology and approach, of the economic impact and the investment that the college was going to have to make to embark upon this journey as well. We had all of that and then some, but I think at the end of the day, it was appropriately placed, because we wanted to make sure that at the end of the day, we were doing the right things for our students. And to do that, we also had to make sure that we had the right applications, solutions, and support for our workforce, for our faculty, for our staff that serve our students at the end of the day as well. Getting back to that ERP system, we had to be concerned about HR functions, about finance functions, and of course about student functionality as well. So we went about, Dr. Mitchell commissioned. In addition to that, what we heard is that the college is not ready. We kept on hearing that was a theme. The college is not ready for this process. It's too big. It's the vision is too large. We're not ready. We can't handle this right now. We're comfortable. We're able to serve students in our current system. There was a variety of perspectives on what technology that we were seeing from the vendors. Is going to the cloud the right approach? The things that we have today are working. Why can't we invest more in the system that we have? We heard a lot of those things, but at the end of the day, what we continue to hear is that the college is just not ready. And so what we did at the time, commissioned by Dr. Mitchell with cabinet support, a lot of administrative committee support as well, is commission a Gartner Modernization Readiness Report. And this happened towards the end of 2018. It's a comprehensive report. I think we've provided that report, Dr. Farmer, to the board as part of the materials that we provided. Jerome will cover a little bit more of this in his presentation. But at the end of the day, Gartner said that the case for modernization is clear and that JJC should continue forward by following through on the recommendations in our report. The case for modernization is clear and JJC should continue forward. So work at the ERP committee continued. We had participation across the college in all functional areas as part of our evaluation process. All of that information flowed up and through the committee by way of surveys, as we performed vendor evaluations and demonstrations. Committee selected 2 software providers as finalists. That was Workday and Campus Management. We had vendor demonstrations in both the fall of 2018 and spring of 2019. The ERP committee completed its work in May of 2019. So literally almost 11 months after the ERP RFP was released to the street, the ERP committee wrapped up its portion of the work in May of 2019. So it was an extensive and comprehensive evaluation process that the college undertook as part of that evaluation and selection of our ERP technology at that time. There was an informal vote taken in late May of that committee. That vote was not a consensus of the committee at that time. This information was forwarded from the RFP committee to Dr. Mitchell and the cabinet. And at that time, Dr. Mitchell was not comfortable that the committee did not achieve consensus. And so what Dr. Mitchell commissioned us to do is to move forward with the selection of our program manager. And the program manager was a recommendation of Gartner's Readiness Assessment Report. So in March of that year, March through June of 2019, we undertook a selection process for our program manager. And then in July of 2019, we hired my esteemed colleague and peer in this journey, and our program manager here at the college, Jerome Godlock, started in July of 2019. And what we felt like we needed at that time was an independent, neutral third party that could shepherd the rest of the process through in a very quantitative scoring analysis of the finalist and product features. The initial RFP, we had 550-ish product specifications, requirements, and features. When Jerome took the process over, we identified over 1,300 feature specifications that we evaluated and scored as part of our final decision. And so with that, I want to welcome Jerome up for his portion of the presentation. We'll take a quick pause. I know it's a lot of information, a lot of historical information. Dr. Farmer, if there's questions kind of on the historical, you want to wait till.
Let me turn on my mic. Can we, Dr. Namuo, take a quick little break, 5 minutes to stretch, and then Chairman, is that okay? Okay. All right.
Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim.
Yep.
So board members, once again, I would like to introduce Jerome Godlock. Jerome?
Thank you, Chairman O'Connell, Board of Trustees, Dr. Namuo. It's really great to be back after the last meeting that I attended and be able to come back and share some of the information. Just to remind everyone, Jim started out in March of 2017, brought us up until July of 2019, and that's where I came on board. And one of the first things that I was hired to do is be the program manager. First meeting was with Dr. Mitchell. I reported directly to her. And as we sat down and talked about the role of what she was expecting, it was really to review those Gartner risk assessment report. And out of that, create a plan to mitigate all of the major items that were found in that report. And prepare JJC for the ERP modernization project that was forthcoming. At the same time, though, there hasn't been a decision on a vendor. And so the question is, how can we reboot the RFP selection process for those remaining 2 software vendors and come up with a way of making a selection that was objective and really looking at everything from a quantitative perspective? And then finally, once that's all done, to manage the implementation of the ERP modernization project as an advocate for JJC. So as I looked at the Gartner assessment summary, and what you're looking at here is just a summary of all the areas that they assessed, there were 4 main areas that were basically highlighted in red. And those are the areas that I initially focused on as I came on board. The first one was the governance model and creating a governance model. And what we mean there is when you have a project the size and scope of the ERP modernization, how you manage through that process of issues, risks that come up on a daily basis, coming up with a way that we have teams in place and a process in place that things get escalated appropriately so that we're capturing those items. So with that, at the lower level, one of the things we talked about having a delivery assurance manager or someone from the software vendor that is responsible. What you're looking at here is the governance model for what we call the platform project. This was the HR, finance, and procurement implementation. Also, at the second level going up from the top was our functional leads. These are people that are responsible for specific departments within JJC that would be working on the project. Above that would be the project management or PMO office, project management office. That's where I sit. And so basically coordinating and moving through the project and coordinating issues. And then if issues did occur, having a way to escalate those to the next level in green, which is the executive steering committee. And that executive steering committee at the time had an executive sponsor, which we created out of this process. And at the time, that was Rob Galick. I believe that was now three vice presidents in the past with some of the change that we've had. And of course, I had a dotted line relationship to Dr. Mitchell. So this was kind of the structure that we put in place. There's a very similar structure for the student project. And the goal was to have this structure put in place as a defined process and defined processes of how things get escalated and rise up to the top for the steering committee to either make decisions or understand what decisions were being made as the project moved along. And later on, when we talk about student phase 2, we'll talk about how this worked as we had to escalate certain issues above and beyond JJC to the software vendor. The second item in those red was talking about business processes. JJC had done a really good job in certain areas of documenting business processes and having those documented so that as they moved toward an ERP, they understood kind of where they wanted to go in the future. But the Gartner found that there were some areas where that documentation or those things had not occurred. So we went out and just a few of these that we looked at and some that were already there are listed here. But there were a lot of business processes that we worked on moving toward in parallel as we're trying to make a selection to try to put together these business processes. What you're looking at here is a sample of the purchase order processing that existed prior to Workday. Another one was then integrations. And here it's basically putting together a simple list of those integrations. Originally, we identified 46 integrations that currently exist. And an integration is essentially where, from a JJC perspective and the internal systems at JJC, there's data that gets sent to other systems, either internal systems or systems outside of JJC. So a good example of this could be at the end of a payroll, we generate files and send to your banks so the bank can actually make payroll or pay people their salaries. So those are some of the examples. We identified early on 46. That had been done by the IT department. As of today, in production, we have over 89 integrations. As part of student phase 2, there's 92 that we're currently tracking that are in progress or in different statuses as we've been moving through our student phase 2. So what that really, says as we've been moving through this is there are things we've been able to take advantage of that we weren't doing earlier, and new integrations that have been built on the HR side and other areas that we didn't have prior. So the next item on that list was sourcing the vendor. And so as we started looking at that sourcing, what you're looking at here is one of the excerpts from the Gartner plan. And what Gartner had recommended was, recommend a final selection using functionality, cost, and the lifespan of the application. And so what we'll talk about now is kind of how we went about that process of determining the process and the information we were going to use to come up with again, an objective way of determining how to select the software. So how do we get there? All these things we talked about, we came up with what we call it became the reboot of the RFP. And as part of that, we came up with an aggressive timeline starting. So I came in July. So now it's been about a month, and now we're at the point of kicking off what we call the reboot of the project. And the goal here is starting by August 23rd, we want to go back and take the specifications from the original RFP, and we want to go back to the business and have people actually add more information. In other words, what are all of the things that you really want in your new software? And as Jim mentioned earlier, we went from 500, and I've got the specific numbers a little later on, to over 1,300 in this time frame. In September, the goal was then to send that information to the vendors and have the vendors respond. And I'll talk about how we rated those based on their responses. And then in September 12th, that information needed to come back to JJC, working with the procurement office to make sure that we were able to score all of that information that came back from those specifications. On September 26th, the goal was then to have a write-up and be able to go back to the steering committee and make sure that the executives team or the steering committee were in agreement with the findings. And then September 26th, the write-up, that was the deadline for the October 9th board meeting. And then the goal was to present at the ERP selection at that October 9th, 2019 board meeting. So that was the kind of plan and the focus that we started with to get us from where we were, reboot, come up with the specifications, and come up with a final decision. So the process, quantitative, in other words, how can we put measurements to all of these specifications so that we can actually measure those specifications? Value driven, how at the end of the day can we make sure that we're getting the best bang for the buck? That was essentially where we were going with this, and trying to minimize the cost for JJC. So, as I said, we ended up with 1,375 specifications, up from the 584 that originally existed. Just to get at a high level, and I know in the appendix somewhere, approximately 54% of those specifications were student and academic affairs related. 35% were related to HR, finance, or procurement, and the others were various areas like IT and other areas. So just to give a kind of an idea of the layout of that information. So at the end of the day with the specifications, what I'm showing you here is the final tally. Workday had 8,997.5 versus campus management, which was the two vendors in question, 9,781.2. How did we get there? So those specifications that each team put together, each one of those specifications, they define how important or prioritize each one of those specifications. The highest score for a specification was that it was a required strategic initiative. In other words, it had to be a piece of functionality that they wanted due to a strategic initiative within JJC. So for that one, it was ranked a 10. And then from there, we had, if it was a department strategic initiative, it was marked as a 7, preferred is a 3, and nice to have was a 1, and not needed was a 0. And to my knowledge, we didn't have any zeros that came in from the 1,300. So now as we sent that information was created. The next step was to now talk about how when the vendor responds to that question. So we were very careful to make sure we gave closed-ended questions that started out as of August 1st, 2019, does your software provide the following functionality? And so that functionality then would go back to that specification. From that specification, their answers could vary. And so what we did then is based on if they said no, then we would have a follow-up question on, well, is there a way if we do a what's called a configuration, whereas the software allows you to go in, basically select a couple of things and the software can do it, or customization where you build a software component or a bolt-on to make it work. Depending on those answers, then we would give percentage of points to that particular vendor based on their answers. So once that was complete and we had that information, that was one of the things that was compiled and sent out to the vendors for them to complete. At the same time, then we wanted to look at financial ratios. So those financial ratios were essentially where we wanted to get information from these firms to look at their viability as an organization. Will they be around 5 years from now, next year? Would they be bought out by another vendor? So these were things that we wanted to take into consideration. As part of that, when we reached out, one of the vendors was a private firm. So that information was, there was basically a process to bring that back. The CFO at the time, or vice president, they took those numbers that came back and they came back with those ratios for each one of those. The last thing that we then wanted to look at, going back to the Gartner, so we've talked about functionality and how we did the functionality. The next thing was to look at cost. So as we looked at that cost, Gartner had recommended that you look at software ERP purchases as a 10-year model, looking out 10 years. So one of the things that Jim mentioned earlier is that as we went through best and final, that 10-year cycle, what you see in a lot of software products is every year there is an increase in the support and maintenance costs. That is the nature of ERP systems as a whole. So as you look at that and you build in your pricing, you build that in so that we could look at this over a 10-year life cycle, and that's where the 10 years came from. We also looked at the implementation cost. Each vendor had a different, either certain vendors had, each software vendor, some of them had different people that would actually do the implementation, different teams. So today, when you hear the word Navigator or AVAP, that is the implementer that we're currently using. So there was the implementation cost that we took into this model for the 10-year expectancy. We looked at travel expenses, additional resources like people, additional software that you may need, and would we be required to, have servers or other things as part of that. And then the other one was change management and training, and making sure that we had the change management and training to make sure employees were ready to maintain the system once it was implemented. So at the end of that, as we looked at the cost, we came up with three items here. And so what I want to make sure I point out is the first one you see, Workday and Collaborative. Workday is the software. Collaborative was the implementation partner. Workday had 2 implementation partners that bidded on the RFP. So Workday and Collaborative came in at $15.8 million. Workday and Navigator, which today is also known as AVAP, they merged with another company. So when you, again, Navigator, AVAP, same company, that's $14.6 million. And then Campus Management, they were doing their own implementation and their price came in at $17.4 million. So we're not done yet though. So we got cost, we've got the specifications, and those specifications came back. So the next thing is now we take that 10-year cost. So at this point, JJC leadership was negotiating for best and final offers. And so that's how, when we look at the pricing that we received, that was based on the best and final offer. We then took the number of points that the companies received from the specifications. At that point, we take that 10-year cost and we divide that by the points, and you basically get a cost per point. And that then, based on our criteria going into this early on as part of the reboot, the lowest cost provider per point was the winner. And that is where you see that Workday came out just under $20 per point difference, or as a total about $3 million over a 10-year period. Okay, and so it took about 20 minutes to get to that, but it was a lot that we went through in a short period of time to come to this point. And again, the goal was to make this an objective decision-making process by looking at it from this perspective and looking at it from a cost per point initiative. So after that's done, we bring that to the board in October of 2019. And after that, it was approved. We spent almost 2 months in contract negotiations, going through the contract process with procurement and JJC's attorney to get through that process of working through all of the contracts for not only the software vendor, but the implementation vendor. So again, 2 contracts that were going. So out of that, we received from our implementation vendor what we call a statement of work. And that statement of work is basically how that vendor is going to take you from step A all the way to implementation, and what does that look like. And so we did that, and what you're looking at here is kind of like the 3 big phases of the project. The first one on the right, so I'm starting left to right, is platform. Platform is made up of the human resource systems benefits, and I won't read all of the software the modules that are under that, but that was the kind of first out of the box implementation that we started with, followed by student phase 1, which is primarily recruiting and admissions and some setup of student. So when we went into student phase 1, we started turning on the student module of Workday. And then student phase 2 is where we are today, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that. So from a timeline, what did that look like? So starting in 2020, January 2020, we kicked off the platform project. Again, that's the HR, finance, payroll, procurement part of the project. So as we kicked that off, that was the first to go. And as you can see from the timeline, then starting in September of 2020, we would then in parallel start the student phase 1 project. And then later in 2021, we would kick off the student phase 2. So this was part of the statement of work that we'd worked on with the implementer and the process that we were going to go through to implement Workday over this period of time.
Real quick, could you slow down just a hair? I'm trying to keep up a little bit with the notes. I'm taking a little bit. Just.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay.
Thank you very much.
No problem. So this is the plan. And some people say sometimes you have great plans and sometimes things happen. So as we started through January, we started going through the planning phase for the ERP platform implementation. We started hitting roadblocks. Some of those roadblocks was something that I don't think anyone could have ever planned on, but it was a pandemic that came about. And I remember I get a call, and I can't remember, it was on a Sunday. I guess the executive steering committee, or in this case, President's Leadership Council, had been meeting over the weekend. And Rob Galick gives me a call and says, got some news for you. We're going to have to shut down the ERP project for now. And understood. I mean, a lot was happening at that time. So there was a decision by JJC that they needed to shut down the project because they needed to focus on pivoting JJC to become a remote workforce to support students, faculty, and staff. And so with that, we had to go back and work with our vendor to understand how do you shut down a project? What's the best way? So coming up with a way of kind of putting everything in a jar and sitting it on a shelf, because we weren't exactly sure how long we would have everything on a shelf. Number two, then, is also trying to make sure we have plans that, when we do start up, how do you start up and what does that look like? Because we were dealing with financials and payroll, one of the things in an ERP system is when you're going live, you generally want to go live around a quarter. And that's around balances. So as you think about how the balances are stored in the system, the quarter is, a way to do it. Some will say it's always the beginning of the year if it's HR payroll, it's your fiscal year if it's more of a financial system. But with that said, our shutdown lasted 6 weeks. But what that meant for us is that we pushed out the project 1 quarter. Okay, so just to kind of talk through that. And so while all of that's going, again, we're trying to run a project, but that's kind of one of the first big hurdles we hit as we came across the pandemic. The next roadblock or hurdle was staff turnover. After we started the project, between April of 2020 and I would say June of 2021, there was a lot of turnover that impacted the project. I'm not speaking for JJC as a whole, but speaking of the project. We lost our HR leader. We lost our finance leader at the time. We also had other turnover. And, the result of that turnover is, and I'll talk about it later, we had trained people that we lost. And so all that training kind of walks out the door, and new people need to be trained and try to get up to speed as fast as we can. There was a lot of internal business knowledge from JJC that we lost as well. And it's really hard to put a price or even, when you lose someone that's been here 4 or 5 years in a specific area, that's a lot of information that walks out. And that new people coming in, that's great that we're filling a seat, but it's not necessarily the same from a project perspective because we're running very fast, trying to make decisions. And then finally, some of the vacancies exceeded 90 days to fill. It took a long time for JJC to fill those vacancies. And we're trying to run a project. And so we're trying to have people come in. And a lot of those people started, there was a lot of team fatigue and exhaustion going on because, and I'll just, I'm not going to say names, but like in payroll, we had one person running payroll for JJC and also on the project. So we had to change all of our staffing around the project to make sure 1 week we're working on Workday so that the next week she could focus on payroll for all of the JJC employees. So again, this is what we were working with and trying to work through it. And that exhaustion finally came to a point in October when Dr. Mitchell came and said there were a lot of people coming saying they're tired, they're exhausted. And I think that Dr. Farmer, you were also in there, and I said, it doesn't get any better from here. This is a hard job. It is a hard project to take an ERP to implementation. And for us to make our deadline, we have to keep moving. We can't take 2-3 weeks off. There was not that time. So a decision was made again to extend the project, to give people rest, to give us the time to be able to find additional people, hire additional people to fill those roles. What I wanted to show here is, when we looked at the, knowledge transfer and the training, as of today, we have just under 3,000 hours of training. And that training is Workday training that we've either paid for through subscriptions that we have with Workday. And that was part of the project cost that I talked about earlier, right? And so with that, former employees, those that were part of that turnover, about 20% of that training has left JJC. That doesn't include the knowledge that also left at that time. So that is a big hit to a project when you have key people that were part of the project that are no longer here. So what I want to show, just to show you the impact of the turnover, this is when we first started the project. These were the people that were aligned to certain modules. And you'll see some people in multiple areas, but this is what our team looked like in January, probably around March of 2020. By the end of the year, those people are gone with the red. This was wave one. This does not include when we filled some of these positions, we still lost those individuals. So again, this was wave one that we dealt with the turnover and the transition. And again, it wasn't just JJC. This was going on in a lot of places, but at the same time, I'm speaking in terms of we're trying to implement a major ERP, as Jim said and others, that touches every part of the organization. So the result of turnover, I've kind of talked through that, but we did it in another extension. At the same time that we're going through this, and as part of that governance model that we talked about, we have what's called a RAID Q log. And so one of the things when you have a project of this size is there are problems coming up every day. Some of them are easy, you put them out very quickly and you move on to the next. Some of them require, you got to escalate. And so what we ask people to do is actually document those in one place. The reason we do that is we don't want, necessarily someone to send an email. I'm in meetings all day and I miss an email. By putting them in there, it helps us track. So what we'll talk about a little later on is what that looked like as we track some of these issues and where we are. But if you go back to the original timeline, all right, and we talked about our original timeline, based on the changes we did with the COVID or the pandemic and the transitions and turnover extensions that we did, this is now our new timeline. With all of that turnover and adversity that I talked about, we went live with platform. And, I just as a side, I want to say it's a testament to the culture at JJC and the leadership at JJC. I saw people who were not part of the project come in, barely know what Workday is. They hadn't been in part of meetings and they stepped to the occasion and they tried hard. They learned, they took training. And, the system has been running. Payroll has been running since the go live. I know at the last meeting, we talked about Jeff and some others working over the weekend, to make sure payroll went out. This is just a testament to the hard work that we see happening within JJC to keep these projects going. Student phase 2 also continued through the process and also went live with student phase 1, recruiting and admissions, which essentially means that any new applicant who comes along and creates an application for the general application, that application is going into Workday and that information is going in from Workday and then interfacing to your colleague system today. So we built these, what we call interim integrations that are sending data back and forth between colleague and Workday as these records are coming in. Another interesting thing that came up was the task union implementation. This was negotiated while we were in the midst of the implementation project. And there was a decision made that from a Workday perspective, we would implement this after the go live of Workday. Again, when we got there, we knew we needed some additional help. And so when we heard, I've heard some names and I think last time we talked about Lisa Villalobos. This is where Lisa came in to help HR over that period of time of implementing the task union implementation, which was essentially the merger of two unions together into a new union. And all of that had to be configured and built in Workday for that to take place. So going back to that RAID Q, when we finished the project for platform, we had over 500 items that had been documented. And you can see there's still some in progress. And what I didn't talk about earlier is you see learning and talent in blue at the end. This is what we call rolling adoption. This was 2 additional modules that we had purchased from Workday, and under our contract with our implementer, they continued to implement those at a later date. The talent system is going live next week. So we're in the midst of testing, and that is getting ready to go live next week. And so some of the things that you see there are things that we've captured just to make sure that, again, things don't get lost as we continue monitoring. Total of 527 RAID Q items for the platform. Again, that's the HR module. Okay. So I want to take a moment here because there is a lot of Workday terms being thrown out. And when I think from last week, I kept hearing Workday, but there were different things that are going on with Workday, and I wanted to point out a couple of those. So we've talked about platform, student, and student phase 2. What you see in the purple is Workday Prism. So Workday Prism is another software product that was purchased by JJC. And Workday Prism is essentially an analytics tool where you're able to take data from separate systems and bring into Workday, but you can then tie that information in so that you're able to report on it and able to get additional information. So there's been a couple of proof of concepts. I know HR has used it for some data. We're looking from a student phase 2 to potentially use Prism for some of that. And again, what's different when we talk about this type of system is, and I heard someone mention, I think last week, last meeting, it's a third party. This one is integrated to your same security. So the same security in Workday and Prism is all tied together. And the system allows those, you're able to move data back and forth and report on that data as if it's one system versus a separate system that you have to go to. The other piece that you see down below is Workday Planning, and that is part of the new budgeting system that JJC is implementing. That went live, I think it was a quick 6-week early go live for that project, and now they're in Workday Planning Phase 2, which is scheduled to go live March of this year. Okay. So what I've done here is just wanted to show for all of those colors that you saw earlier for platform, I wanted to show who's implementing. So if you notice on the far right for Workday Planning, the implementer for Workday Planning is Workday, the corporation. They are actually the implementer for Workday Planning. All the other items that you see there, AVAP is the implementer. It is a different contract for AVAP under Workday Prism than the other 3. I am only responsible for the platform, student phase 1 and student phase 2. JJC is responsible for the Prism and the Workday Planning. So just to give kind of who some of the players are and some of the responsibilities, that's kind of what this slide is aiming to do. All right, so we talked about student phase 1. We've talked about platform. Those are already live and running. And then we started in late 2021, phase 2 of student phase 2. So we talked about how difficult the implementation of platform, the HR and finance. Student is about 3 times the complexity of HR finance. And when I talk about that, it's really because, number one, the number of people that need to come together because everything on the student side is tied together. It's very hard. Anything that happens in financial aid impacts student financials. Anything that happens in records impacts financial aid, impacts student financials. It's all very tied together. So when we're making decisions, whereas sometimes if you're in benefits, you can make a decision, it may impact payroll, but we don't have to call procurement, right? In this case, almost every decision we need to go through many meetings to get through the process. So the complexity is there. From a RAID Q perspective, again, going back to that RAID Q law, currently we have 191 items that are documented. 32% of those are still open. About 62 are open and active. And we'll be talking about some of those that we've had to escalate. And in particular, there are 4 that we'll talk about in detail. So as part of that, the most significant issues that we have impact our financial aid area. Workday's functionality does not meet JJC's needs as it's currently designed. So as we've been going through that, the Workday financial aid team documented, and they've done a fantastic job of documenting every issue. So again, I'm talking about the tip of the iceberg here when we talk about these 4, but the 4 issues that we're talking about, as I talked about earlier, impact other areas based on the way they are working. So those 4 issues have been prioritized at the top, not to say or diminish other issues that are out there. We understand that, but we're starting with those 4. And as we talked about these issues, as they came from the functional areas to the project management office, we then brought them to the our executive steering committee. Once we understood that these were issues, then we went back to Workday and said, hey, we have a problem. So we started through the process of escalating through what Workday calls their SPIRE process, which is the student product issue and resolution and escalation process. Essentially, we have to go through and initiate these cases with Workday. That is done through our implementer. So everyone's kind of involved as we go through this process of escalating those issues. Those issues were escalated. Here are the 4 issues. The first one is what we call the scheduling of the nightly orchestration process. And I need to drink after saying that. Essentially, the way Workday works, and some of you have seen other software products like this, you may use your credit card and you'll go out and you'll buy something. And if you go and check your your bank statement, you may not even see that credit card charge there. And then that charge may show up, a day or so later. So what Workday does is that there are certain changes to a student's record, in particular, if they drop a course or they add a course, what that impact has on, say, their financial aid or other things, it gets updated on a nightly basis. So it is not real time. Today, in today's world, and colleague, that would be real time. If a person dropped a course, they could actually see what that impact is immediately. The second item is what we call real-time anticipated aid. At JJC, your process is that you automatically you show students their full aid that is possible for them even before they register for courses. With Workday, they wait until you essentially start registering to show you how much aid you would be available based upon how many courses you've registered for. So with those changes, that's one of the changes. The multiple SAP policies for specific student groups. Number 3, essentially, Workday allows you to create SAP, or let me go back. Satisfactory academic process is what SAP stands, progress. Thank you, Jim. What that stands for. But essentially, what happens here is if you are say a sophomore biology major, then based upon that information, Workday can actually define and we can do the satisfactory academic progress on that. However, if you're a veteran, which means you're part of a group, because a veteran could be a freshman, a veteran could be a sophomore, that is where Workday does not work the way JJC needs it. And so that was priority number 3. And then the last one is what we call fractional units, which is essentially where for example, in radiology, there are certain programs that you can complete with a fractional unit. In other words, instead of 61 credits, you can have 60.5. Workday has a field that does not allow that fractional unit. And because of that, there's a rounding item that we found. So we initially, that one went in as a bug. Workday came back and said it's working as designed. And we said, no, there's a problem here. So those are the 4 top items that we escalated through this SPIRE process. Workday then came back to us after a couple of weeks of us initiating these and essentially said, well, this is how the system is currently designed. And there are some manual workarounds. So they gave us some manual workarounds to work around these issues. At that point, our executive steering committee, that's not acceptable. So we reached out to Workday, initiated a meeting, I believe in one of the President's Leadership Council meetings. Some members of Workday came and they did hear from JJC's leadership. Later on, second bullet, executive team met with Workday representatives. Third bullet, we met with the product team. These are actually the leaders that are over the areas where they design the system. And basically meeting with other departments and other areas of JJC expressed our concerns. We've also been going out in what's called Workday Community and basically trying to what we call create brainstorms or work with other schools with these brainstorms around these issues that we found. Also, JJC has requested some concessions from Workday, and that's still pending as of today. So that's kind of where we led to that point with Workday. So why are we here? Workday's financial aid modules lacks the automation that JJC is looking for. Because of that, and as we reached out, and one of the things we did is we did a readiness survey of the team. And what we found was various things. Team members feeling that we were not ready to go live. We still had some outstanding integrations. We had some other things that we're working on. In particular, we had these big gaps in functionality from a financial aid perspective. And looking back, when we think about some of these issues, there are compliance issues that we have to think about. And not wanting to be in a position, with some of these compliance issues, we wanted to find ways and take the time to figure out how can we actually fix these issues or come up with better ways to resolve these issues so that we could move forward with the project. So with that, we came up with a couple of options. One is we stay on the current path. And again, we're talking about these options now in November of last year, December, is that we stay on that current path to go live. Option 2 was extend the project by 1 year. And what we were looking at there is taking the time to research, are there any third-party financial aid systems that would give us what we're looking for? To replace that of the current financial aid in Workday. And the other one is we extend the project until Workday resolves those major financial aid gaps that we've talked about. So when we looked at those different options, obviously, as we talked through those and we escalated those with other members of the team, if we go with option 1, obviously we could go live, but we would have that issue with the financial aid. And there were some deep concerns there. Risk of compliance issues and having those manual solutions put in place gives way to potentially more errors. At the same time, taking into account the survey team, about our readiness to go live. So we took those into consideration. We also looked at option 2 and the pros and cons associated with that. And with that one, it would give us some additional time to look for a third-party financial aid, could eliminate the need for, potentially hiring additional people to do those manual transactions. At the same time, we would extend the need for colleagues, so we would continue having to pay the colleague support and maintenance fees. We'll require additional effort and hours from our implementation partner, so additional cost there. And will require, potentially new integrations if we bring in a new financial aid system. And so we estimated that cost to be $2.4 million. And I forgot the estimated cost for option 1 was $621,000. And then finally, for option number 3, it was extend the project until Workday has resolved these major financial aid gaps. One of the concerns there is right now, all of those items are not in Workday's, what we call their roadmap. In other words, all of those are not in the roadmap to be resolved over the next 2 to 3 years. So we're looking at an extended period of time, which brings in a high cost. And as you go out in time with changes that may occur between now and say 3 or 4 years ago, you may be looking at a re-implementation of that system. Also, JJC will need to support 2 ERPs as they're doing today between now and that particular time, whatever that time was into the future. So we looked at that over potentially a 5-year period, again, just as we were just trying to plan out with this, and came up with a price of $8.7 million. The pros of that obviously would be you have one system for students, faculty, staff, where they're all going to one system, a holistic solution for JJC, and additional resources would not necessarily be needed by JJC's financial aid system because we would have all of those items in the system if we were to wait for that. Other items that were considered, financial aid remains in colleague and all other functions in Workday. And again, that was something that we thought about, but as you start looking at what it takes to keep a financial aid system up and running, it's essentially you have to have both systems up and running with data going back, because again, you have to have student data and other things going back between both systems. A new RFP. Do another selection process. And again, that could be a very costly solution to go out and find a new ERP and then to implement that. Another one is all student functionality stays in colleague, our current state. And again, that is an option that JJC would have. Again, that would mean you're paying for 2 ERPs at the same time as you're going through that, as colleague would need to stay up and running, as well as Workday. And the other one would be migrating all functionality back to colleague, which is essentially, I call it an implementation in reverse, where you're trying to do an implementation to take 2+ years of data, 2 years of data that we currently have in Workday, and now we would have to take that back. So again, these options were things that were talked about, but not seriously considered as we went through this process. So the cabinet recommendation at that point was option 2, extend the project by 1 year. And that is the item that it will be going through for board consideration. Again, the thought here is it provides additional time for JJC to research other financial aid alternatives, for us to also think more creatively about alternatives of if we don't have that system, how we can make that occur as automated as possible within Workday. Provides time for JJC staff to acquire more Workday training. So going back to that readiness survey where people said that they needed more training, that it also gives us time to organize our change management and organizational change management. Now that we know those specific issues, we can actually start working on change management activities and our OCM activities around to support students as they transition to Workday. Gives us more time to validate the data and determine how additional data can be stored in Workday. Again, as I go back to those RAID queue issues, some of the things we've noticed as we've been going down this process is there are some data pieces that we would like to have in Workday that currently there's no home for. As I talked about earlier, the PRISM module gives us that opportunity to potentially house some of that data. And more time to test and complete Workday student reports and integrations, which is part of that RAID queue log that I talked about of outstanding items, and more time to hire additional staff if needed to support Workday as we move forward. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Jim.
All right, thank you, Jerome. Appreciate this. So how do you wrap up an hour-and-a-half long presentation? It's difficult to do, but this has been, at this point, 2017 to 2023, a nearly 6-year journey of our ERP and technology modernization efforts at this point. And so as I was thinking about this, some of these thoughts kind of came to mind as I was trying to sum things up. So first thing being is that, and Jerome said it a little bit earlier in his discussion, but the people that we have here at Joliet Junior College have been exceptional. To think about the work that has been done on our ERP modernization and our Workday implementation over the course of the last few years, to think further that that work has been done during a pandemic. The efforts that we've seen, especially with the transition that Jerome talked about, people not engaged in the project, stepping up, coming forward, and assisting to get us over the finish line has been nothing short of exceptional. The people here at the college is a testament to the strong culture, the rich tradition and history of JJC, that we have the people that we have to implement the big initiatives, the big ideas, to execute against the vision and our strategic plans for the college is to the credit of the great people in our organization. As you've heard over the course of the last 90 minutes, our process from start to finish has been comprehensive. We've shown resilience as an organization, as people of the college, as people that are implementing this technology. We've shown resilience, grit, determination, and a never quit attitude that has allowed us to be successful, and we've been successful. We're 60% live in the Workday environment. We've gone live on HR. We've gone live on finance. We've gone live on student phase 1. We've gone live on things that we hadn't initially planned for, Workday planning, Workday Prism Analytics. We've encountered every obstacle that you could possibly think of, and even those that you would never think would occur, we've overcome as a result, again, of the people. We've been successful. Our success is not only to the credit of our people, but it's also to the credit of our partners. We've had great partners in Workday. We've had great partners in AVAP. They've gone through the same pandemic that we have. They've experienced the same transition of people that we have. They backfilled those people, brought new people to the table. Yes, there was obstacles. Yes, there was failures. But at the end of the day, we've overcome those failures and we've been successful. We've stayed true to our history as the nation's first, which calls upon us to be innovative. We've stayed true to our core values of innovation. We are leaders with respect to the modernization of our technology. We're respected as leaders. People look to us for the big ideas, for the visions, but more importantly, the fact that we execute against our plans, our strategies, and our visions. This initiative has been transformative. There's a reason why that you don't embark upon a modernization effort like this, but once every 25, and in our case, 34 years. I think Trustee Lee corrected the math, but 34 years. There's a reason why that you don't embark upon these types of initiatives, because we've seen, and you've heard tonight over the course of the last 90 minutes, the obstacles that we face, but yet we've still been successful. The biggest, most complex, the dirtiest part of this initiative is what remains. And quite frankly, it's what's been worked for, what we've toiled long hours, day after day, month after month, week after week, year after year in this case, is the implementation of the student system. Our staff has brought the best of their subject matter expertise, the best of their brilliance, the best of their insight in how to serve students. They brought that to the table every single day in this initiative. And it's, we've listened to that input. We've listened to that feedback. And it's a big part of the reason why we're here today, to ask you to consider this 12-month extension to allow Workday to bring more functionality to the student system to the table, so we can feel confident, hopefully at this time next year, and be ready to go live in the spring of 2024 in advance of the fall 2024 semester. And so with that, I'll close my remarks. I know it's been a long presentation. We really, again, appreciate your time, your patience, your interest, the questions, discussion, all of that has ensued over the course of the last couple of weeks. But again, our ask at the February 15th meeting will be to extend the project by 12 months. And the cost to do that, we have estimated at just shy of $2.5 million. And so with that, Chairman O'Connell, Board of Trustees, President Namuo, Executive Vice President Farmer, I will wrap up our presentation this evening.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Jim, sir, and Jerome Gotlock. At this point, I would like to open this up for any questions from the board, and I do appreciate you holding all your questions until we got through this presentation. So the floor is yours.
May I request that we start at the beginning of the slides?
The slide?
And go through them and let's all ask our questions that we wrote down on each slide.
Sure, absolutely.
This may be a little bit of an off question, but is it possible for us to take like a 2-minute break or a 3-minute break?
I think we do need another break.
Just
I
to-
think we're getting very spoiled now with these breaks.
yeah.
I
This
think
is
it's
a very, very,
Yes.
definite subject that we want to talk about.
So Chairman O'Connell, is okay if we take a 2-minute break?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you.
All right, now we're going to go through the questions and answers, and we're going to, as I stated, we're going to ask for records to be recognized for each person and go from there. So anyway.
Would you like me to facilitate?
Yes.
Okay, no problem.
I sure would.
All right, I would like to start with Stemborski, our student trustee. If you have any questions at this time, we're going to give the floor to you.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Farmer.
But aren't we going through slide by slide?
That was,
So some may have something, some
Yes.
may not. So if you're doing it that way, if they pass,
Okay.
As long as we're recognized.
yeah,
At a time.
yeah.
Okay.
This
All right.
sense.
All right.
all right,
So
that's
let's
fine.
try to do that.
We can go with that.
All right, thank you.
Go ahead.
I want to know who came up with the design for that first slide is my question. So
One.
I'm just joking.
Where would we, this is probably slide 1.
Does anyone have any questions for this slide?
Well, if you go around,
Okay, any questions for slide 1, Stemborski?
Not as it stands, no.
Okay.
I do.
Trustee Mahalik?
No.
Garcia again? Chairman O'Connell?
No.
Vice
Trustee
Chair.
Broderick does. All right. Okay, it says the Aleutian Colleague Roadmap. What was the roadmap? And did you move to improve any of the improvements that Aleutian system recommended? Because I'm hearing that you basically said the roadmap, you're looking at the technology that was associated with Aleutian. You said it was too challenging. It was time to look at another ERP. I'm trying to figure out, because I was sitting on that board the whole time, and I don't remember hearing updates from Aleutian. And all of a sudden we were, let's do a new ERP because we were tired of band-aiding. But now I'm hearing from the users, and I'll say the users, that we did not have Aleutian updates that we should have.
Yeah, it's probably a pretty nuanced question. So tough to probably get into all of the details of that. Generally speaking, the lack of a roadmap from Colleague was they didn't have a clear roadmap on how they were going to modernize the technology. It was very much legacy on-premise technology that we required to run servers and software here in our data center. Their solution to evolve to the cloud was very unclear at that time. Their strategy for going to the cloud, again, this is going back to 2016, 2017, was to lift the servers and software that we had in our data center and move it to an Aleutian-owned data center. That was essentially what their cloud delivery model of their solution was at that time. They gave us one customer reference of that solution at that time, which was Mercer. I believe they're out of Georgia or Atlanta, near Atlanta. We were never able to contact anybody at Mercer that would talk to us about that solution. We had done a variety of updates, had been doing a variety of updates to the Ellucian colleague system over time. Some of those were failed implementations of new modules. Some of the new modules we did uptake from Ellucian and implemented those successfully. But holistically, there was a very unclear path on modernization of their technology, the legacy technology at their core, the database that they were using, and evolving their technology and solution to the cloud.
But was that due to us not having enough knowledge to do it, or them not having enough instructional opportunities to provide to us?
We're probably getting nuanced here, but it was basically they did not have a viable technology roadmap or solution at that time.
Next question.
Alicia?
Trustee Morales,
Yeah,
please.
so, no, the only thing wrote down for this slide is that you said we'd received a $2.1 million Title III grant, and we couldn't figure out how to spend it. Or we were going back and forth, right, how to spend it?
Yeah, I think as you would expect, when you receive a grant like that, there's a lot of campus-wide conversation, and there was at the time, correct me if I'm wrong, about the best way to leverage those grant dollars. And I think, Dr. Farmer, correct me if I'm wrong, that was part of what was happening with our student enrollment management plan. It was funding, this high-touch, high-tech service for students. And my memory is escaping me a bit, but I think a lot of those dollars were spent in that area, if I recall.
That's correct. In fact, we used the Title III grant, which is a strengthening institution grant. That $2.1 million grant was to implement our guided academic pathway, if the board will remember that, including updating our website. We invested a lot of money in our website. And then also that is a time when we moved forward with our academic advising redesign.
Thank you. And I thought you said that Ellucian did not host software that could maintain all the changes, something around those lines. Let me see here, Ellucian roadmap. Oh yeah, the colleague roadmap. They couldn't host certain software, but yet many colleges across the country still use that. I have been using it for 34 years. Okay, that's all I have to say on this statement, because right now I'm really trying to think exactly how I'm going to move forward, because I'm really unhappy right now. Sure. So I'll just pass it over to my fellow trustee.
Trustee Buzinski, please.
I'm going to step back to what Trustee Broderick just asked about roadmaps. The comment was made that in 2017, Ellucian had no clear roadmap. So at this point, I'm led to believe because of that, we disqualified them as a solution. However, in this presentation here, and in the hours I spent in the conference room next door going over all the processes, I have come nowhere near finding a roadmap for Workday that satisfies the needs of the college. So how was that ever even considered when its roadmap doesn't exist? 2017 to now, we're almost 6 years into this. They don't have a working solution yet, but we had one on campus that just needed to be upgraded. I'm really disturbed that we would even consider Workday at any point after everything I've seen. And I don't want to go through every slide one at one, but it's just slide after slide of details that tells me this was the wrong decision. The wrong decision. Nothing fancy other than as a university or a college, we all are part of this decision, even if we weren't here. Right now, we have something that's broke. I don't see it as viable. I don't think spending $2,500 a year to keep it going without concessions from Workday is the answer. We still do not have a roadmap from Workday that, from what I'm gathering, the system is working as designed. It's not designed to work. So somebody mentioned going to a whole new ERP. It may be very, very costly, but it may be necessary. In one of the slides that Jerome showed us, we looked at the mass exodus of people. I'd like to see how many of those people left because of the implementation failure of Workday. Did people leave because they've had it? You know, you go to work every day to a solution that doesn't work, your job requirements stayed the same and you're told to make it work. At some point, you look for something better to do. And I don't, you know, I've been on board meetings where we looked at people that left and the answer was, well, maybe if we had paid them more. Well, maybe if we didn't try to force Workday into their plate, it might have made a difference too. I don't know what any exit interviews look like. I don't know what anything, even the matrices that we looked at, costs that we looked at, the cost may have been cheaper, but it was a cost of non-conformance. It doesn't do what we need it to do, period. There's no roadmap that says it's ever going to work. We've gotten, from what I understand, no clear-cut answer from Workday that they can resolve this. If it's working the way they intended it to, and it's not working the way we need it, it's not the solution that we should be discussing tonight. And I have note after note after note that's very disturbing on, you know, some of the things we talk about. We talk about a 10-year fixed pricing. Well, that's great, but we have a graduated implementation, but yet we were paying full price year one. Why did we pay for full price in year one when we were only using 60% of it for the first few years? Now we're at the point we can't implement it 100%, which we're still paying 100% for it, but yet we're going to pay more for it because. So at one point, there had to have been somebody in all of this that said, this will not work for us. And I want to know why that person didn't stand up, why those people didn't stand up, and how, after looking at all the data that I've seen, we chose this solution.
I would,
Not your turn.
I want you to go slide by slide because it's important.
Well, you still can. I'm just not going to keep getting.
You're jumping around.
Okay.
He's jumping through his notes. He's jumping through.
All right.
He's jumping through.
All right.
Okay, I have something really short, sweet, and simple for this first slide.
Is there any,
You said that this has been successful.
Dr. Farmer?
But one moment, Bazinski, I thank you for your comments. Jim, would you like to respond to any of that at this point?
I think Trustee Budzinski said a lot. I think what I could follow, I mean, certainly Workday has roadmaps for their entire product, HR, finance, and students. So I think Dr. Farmer, as a follow-up action, we could certainly provide roadmaps. That was one of the things that I heard. Trustee Lee sounds like she might ask part of what Jim just stated as well. So Jim, is there, if there's any other question that you had
Not on slide one. I've been.
that I could respond to?
No, go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. Trustee Lee, please.
You keep saying that this has been successful. It has not been a success, in my opinion. I understand how hard everyone at this college has worked to implement the first two phases, and I feel bad at all the hard work that has gone in and the employees that have worked so hard, and I don't want to be down on them, and I don't want to make them feel like what they have done and they have contributed is all for nothing, because that's, you know, it's sad. It's sad that this mistake it's sad that this mistake happened. And to keep calling this a success sounds like you're feeding me blubber, okay? Because it's BS. It's not a success. So if we cannot implement it and we have to keep feeding money into it, and we don't know if it's ever going to work, because they may never be prepared to do the student services sides of things, then it's not a success. And the other thing is, the question is not whether or not we needed to update our systems. I think that from the first few slides, it was all about we need to update our systems. We need to update our systems. The question that we are here to address today is whether or not we chose the right system to implement, and how we came to that decision to implement the wrong system, and was all of the facts given to the board for them to make the correct decision on which system to vote for.
Jim, sir, would you like to respond to that statement?
So the implementation has been successful. We are live on HR. We are live on finance. We are live on student recruiting and admissions. Last year, we processed 21,000 applications in Workday as part of phase one of our student system implementation. We've implemented, we modernized and simplified the college's budget planning process with Workday planning. We have a phase 2 of Workday planning that will go live in the first week of March. To the credit of Jeff Heap and Anna Perry, Daryl Langloy, the finance team are doing a phenomenal job on that project that will allow us to model our workforce and labor costs as part of our budget process here at the college. And we're leveraging our first use case for all of our historical worker data in Prism Analytics with a plan to leverage Prism as part of our student phase 2 efforts as well. So Trustee Lee, I appreciate the comments, understand the frustration, but I would argue on those points that the implementation has been successful, will continue to be successful as we go forward. We're in the early stages of this implementation, certainly learning a lot, have gone through a lot with the pandemic and everything else, all the obstacles that we presented, but we have been successful to this point.
Okay, I do have a recommendation because we have over 62 slides. And instead of us going slide by slide, what I would like to do is start off with Stemborski one more time. And if you can ask all your questions and which page number on the PowerPoint, that might be helpful. Okay.
That sounds good.
All right. So Trustee Stemborski.
All right. I have a lot of questions. So first of all, if I'm asked, by what metric do we define success? Because success can mean quite a lot. So when you say the implementation has been a success, what does that actually mean?
So for HR and finance, for payroll, benefits, all of your HR, human resource functions, recruiting of employees, onboarding of employees, all of the functionality within HR, we went live July 1st of 2021. From day one, we have paid all of our employees on time and accurately as part of our implementation of HR. We also went live on July 1st, 2021 of our finance system. So all of the college finances, all of our procurement activities are running through Workday with automated workflows, reporting, et cetera. That's now been live for a year and a half as well. As I mentioned, we went live with student recruiting and admissions and have processed over 21,000 applications in 2022 through Workday as well as part of our student phase 1 implementation. So we have many metrics beyond that we could provide on a business process by business process basis as well. Happy to provide that to the board. But on those metrics and the fact that we've gone live on that, I would say that Trustee Stemborski, those are measures of success in a program and a project of this scale and complexity.
On that note, we were talking about retention. You were giving me a lot of numbers based upon like hitting goalposts, which are good. That tells us that the project itself is moving forward. But if the employees don't like it, and we're kicking and screaming to those goalposts, I'm not sure if I would define that as success. So do the employees actually like Workday as a system?
You know, I think certainly we've surveyed employees. I know Judy Conley and the HR team are very happy with the improvements that we've seen relative to our implementation of Workday on the HR side. We've seen a lot of improvements and increase in our ability to process more efficiently on the HR side. You know, we did a survey of the HR finance, all of the staff associated with platform phase 1. I'd have to go back and look at the survey results. Again, we would need to come back and survey now a year and a half, going to 2 years down the road of being live, do another survey of staff to get their level of satisfaction with the system at this time. Again, when you go live with a program and a project of this size and scope, when you do it through a pandemic, all of the effort, energy, and focus is on the implementation and on that go live. And so, you know, we're really in the second or third inning of a 9-inning baseball game when it comes to the maturity, the acclimation of the solution, of the technology, of the proficiency of our staff, of what our investment can do for us holistically across the college. That takes time. And along with that, in parallel, we've seen a lot of staff transition as well. That is not directly related to the implementation of Workday. There's a lot of global factors. The pandemic, of course, we've seen transition of staff across the globe in organizations of all sizes where people realize that they want more flexibility in their work-life balance. And so we've seen some of that certainly here at the college as well. I think Judy provided some information to the board relative to some of the folks that exited and asked direct questions relative or not to whether it was due to workday or not. And I think that was a relatively low number if I remember correct from what I saw. So hopefully, Trustee Stamborski, I answered your question.
You did, and you're correct in the fact that there's been a lot of turnover. But if is brought up by Trustee Bunzinski that if it's a possibility that workday pushed some of those numbers, I think it would be a good idea to get concurrent numbers on how the staff feels about workday both in the past and for now and compare them, because it's entirely possible that previously it may have been a little bit, the employees would have liked it. And then as they move forward, they realize it's a flawed system. So there could be a movement there. And, you know, it's a difficult system. I'm well aware that it is difficult to learn a brand new system, but those numbers are still important. And if you could provide those to the board, that would be appreciated. Another question that I have.
One more reaction to kind of some of your comments, which are great comments. I think, you know, take workday out of the equation. Any implementation, ERP implementation of this size, my expectation would be that staff are not going to be satisfied because it is incredibly difficult, complex. Jerome talked about the exhaustion of the staff. Again, doing an implementation of this size during normal operating conditions is a massive undertaking. But doing this ERP implementation on top of the pandemic was exhausting for staff across this entire organization. Myself, my peers here on the cabinet, people on the project, we've seen it across every corner of this institution. Folks were certainly exhausted for a lot of reasons.
And I totally agree with you. I don't disagree with anything you said. But if we were to do like a 1 to 10 survey and we went from like an 8 to like a 6, that's one thing. If we went from like an 8 to a 2, that's another thing. Hence why it would probably be good for us to look at over the data another time. So I agree with you, but I think the data needs to speak for itself.
Sure.
Another question is the point-based system that you used to determine that workday was, Jerome, the point-based system, how you determined that workday was the correct decision. Can you explain to me how the point-based system came to be, or how you determined that was the correct method?
So, a couple of things. If you recall, JJC had already gone through the RFP process to down select to two vendors. So a lot of information had gone through that RFP. So as part of what I think came out of the Gartner findings was, let's look at this from, again, that functionality and from a cost perspective. So as I came in to kind of take the Gartner components and move forward, it was how can you come up with a method so that you could come up with a score. And again, at that time, and again, things have changed just based on the budget thing that I hear now. But when I came in, budget was very, it was very cost conscious about how much the organization would pay for the software at the time. So we came up with that kind of value proposition to make sure that we go through that process. We're looking at it from that functionality and how much will it cost for each piece of functionality that you get. So that was the thinking behind that.
Were there any other methods that you were tossing around at the time that this method was chosen?
So there were several other methods that you could have gone through. The question then becomes time, and how much time do we have to kind of hit that window in order to try to start in 2020. So with that said, this was one that we thought we could reboot again without having to start all over and collect new information. Start from where we had that 500 and plus specifications, increase those so that we could get that done in a very short period of time. And then taking that into account and having the weighting put on it by each department would come back giving us that weighted component of each one of those to come back with the number. So that was kind of the scenario we went through at that point. Again, based on the Gartner recommendation that was given.
That's good. Would you say that, of course, some timeframes need to be seated within our operating capacity? However, would you say that this process was in any way rushed? Because you said time was a major factor. That's why I'm asking.
When you say rushed, I'll say it a different way. It was an aggressive timeline that we had. Again, with any project, when you map out your timeline or your overall what you're trying to do from an objective perspective, it's trying to make sure that you can hit certain points along the way, those milestones, to keep everything moving forward. So we're working with things like board meetings that we have to schedule between, things like that kind of guide you into that process. So again, it was aggressive. Again, we knew that the project was an aggressive project of this size and scope to implement, and again, trying to keep your cost as low as possible.
That makes sense. As you extend the project longer, you're going to drive up costs. That makes a lot of sense. And you have to keep it within the board meetings, hence the systematic, there's certain time frames that you have to seat it in.
Correct.
However, would extra time would have proven beneficial in this circumstance?
At the time, I don't think so. Again, as I came in, there had been thought that you've already been in an RFP for almost a year, which is a long time for an RFP of this size. And so a lot of energy, effort from the collective JJC team, and I can't remember exactly how many people were on the original committee. Again, I came in as more of an impartial. I didn't even see that information. I just came in with kind of the blinders to kind of get to that next step to say, how can we evaluate these from an objective perspective? And so what you're looking at is an objective way of actually taking two products and looking at them from a perspective of those functions, specifications, and the price per point.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a couple more questions about the point-based system. So for the point-based system, if it was it sounds from the way that you're speaking, correct me if I'm wrong, that was the option that we went to because it was the quickest. You said that time was a major factor and you had to choose something. Were you searching around for other potential avenues, or was this the one that you knew going in?
This was the one recommended by Gartner that we implemented. Again, as I said, I came in to implement the Gartner findings. And so what you find in those Gartner findings is essentially what I came in to do.
All right, sweet. I was looking at the point-based system and a couple things kind of popped out at me. So for one, 10 and 7 on the point-based system indicate that these are mission critical items. These are things that we need for the college to function. 5 and the 3 are things that are like kind of either necessary, but kind of nice to haves. And like one was kind of it was nice to have, but not at all necessary. The problem I was looking at the system is you could have like 2 5s that are things that are nice to have and have a missing mission critical item on there. So looking at that point-based system, there's a big flaw determines when I'm looking at that, where you can miss a lot of mission critical items because of that 10-based system. Does that make any sense? Do you want me to re-explain?
Repeat that again.
All right. So on a scale of 1 to 10, that's how we determine the point-based system. You could have a lot of 5s and not a lot of 10s and do much better on that system than if you had a few 10s. So you come off with a lot of nice stuff that you don't need versus not a lot of stuff that you actually do need. Do you kind of see what I'm saying?
Yeah. And so again, if we go back, the process was those specifications were, so again, I didn't create the specifications. This came from each department. They created, here's my list of items. And so the ranking that you're speaking of, the 10, 7, 5 going as we go down that was basically the priority giving to us from that department. So again, the thought is that the departments know those critical items, and so they're providing their weighting based upon the criticality of each of those items.
Yeah, but the system itself is what I'm kind of the 10 point based system is the flawed part, not how the way that the departments determine what is mission critical and what is not mission critical. That's what I'm
May I try to help
sure.
you? So what he's saying is that
Hold it. Hold it.
when you put
So wait a minute. We're
oh, you know what? That's okay. I can
we're gonna go.
We can continue.
Let's go back to Yolanda, and she's gonna facilitate this.
Yes, and I still have a bunch more questions. So this is yeah.
Absolutely. We want to honor that. I believe Dr. Namuo would like to make a comment or.
Reading my mind.
Yes, always. Absolutely.
You do the signal?
Doing the
Yeah.
signal, right.
Didn't you see it?
This is the secret signal. I think at this point, what I'd like to do and propose for the board to kind of consider, I've got two things for the board to consider. I'm sensing some fatigue in the room, and that's completely understandable. But at the same time, I want to honor all of your interests and your concerns. So I've got a couple of things for the trustees to consider. The first would be a second work session, essentially a continuation of this exact thing. All we would do is put a pause in it and come back either connected to February 15th or another date, but soon. Okay, so there's something for the trustees to consider. The second thing I'd like to offer, and I know we're not taking board action today, but I guess I'd be seeking consensus. So as many of you know, my background is in technology. I've had some conversations with many of you in terms of this entire project and how it's going to move forward. There's a tool available to project managers and those involved in the software development lifecycle, systems analysis and design. And that tool is called Independent Validation and Verification. It's called IV&V. And for those of you in the general contracting world, it's similar to commissioning, or if you're purchasing a property, you want to verify that it is what the person selling it to you claims that it is. So this IV&V process, there are maybe a handful of companies that do this. What it essentially is a third party, not connected to JJC, not connected to Workday, not connected to AVAP, not connected to the project at all, to Gardner at all. A completely independent look at the state of Workday, how we got to where we are. And for those, I could provide more information between now and if we do agree to do a follow-up work session. This independent verification and validation process is a very powerful tool. So those two things I want to offer to the trustees to consider and perhaps develop consensus around. Now, I'm not sure how you want to do that, Chairman, or if.
Well, you've put that out there, and so let's ask for a consensus. We're gonna do this. We're gonna go to another meeting later.
Is it before the next board meeting though, or before the 15th? Because
Could also be, yeah, it could also be on the same day.
Could be on the
Could
same
also be
day.
connected.
But do take into account that on the 15th, this should not be an item on the agenda until these things are worked out.
I think that's.
So that will be a hold off on that item for the agenda.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And in fairness to the
That's
money
gonna-
that's being asked for, we would like to see that $2,500 or $2.5 million split into the line items, what each value represents.
Right.
And so that we can vote on each one independently in discussion that affects each one.
Right.
Because there's going to be some follow-up in that meeting, and I don't want to have it to vote yes or no on $2.5 million. I want to be able to break it down and.
Line item,
Line item.
action item, excellent. Okay.
Yep.
Consensus around an additional follow-up work session, I'm hearing, I'm
Agreed.
feeling. Okay. Consensus around IV&V.
Yeah,
I agree.
I think that's the best way to go.
we didn't do that in the beginning. We never did that.
No, we did not.
Why not?
A little bit. I mean, I think
was-
Gartner was brought in to assess and to provide us. I think what
Well-
Dr. Namu was talking about is something different than that, which
Yeah,
is
and I
now
mean-
on the back end.
Right,
You
they
know.
brought in Gartner, but they didn't bring in Gartner, the Magic Quadrant to utilize, which is another faction of Gartner, which would have given us a better scope of things.
I'm not arguing
just
with you
saying,
about it.
I'm
It
just saying.
To your point,
I'm
what
just
was
saying.
brought in at the time was what was needed at the time to tell us what we needed and how to
I think
get
there are
there.
actually two different measurements.
Correct. I
There are,
agree.
there are.
Your measurement isn't the process, your measurement is the solution.
The solution.
So that's what we want, is to measure the solution, not
Correct.
how we got to it.
Right.
So I've leaned on my network in regards to the IV&V. I'm feeling consensus from the board. I will pursue that. And then I will have a definitive answer at the follow-up work session in terms of cost and timeline. But my sense, based on conversations with my colleagues who are in a very similar situation across different states. And as many of you noted, none of them are here in Illinois. Nonetheless, there's some information out there. I commit to bringing that to the follow-up work session.
And I think in a follow-up to Josh's comments, there was a survey that was done that was 85% showing the implementation was not a success. And success to me, and I'll say this, when you're in a baseball game, if you're in the 7th inning and it's 10-9, I'm not saying I've won yet. Not till I got to the 9th inning, it's closed. So I do consider what Michelle said, this is not a success. And we need to have the stakeholders that are involved. They need to do a survey, all of the stakeholders, which includes us as stakeholders, the administration, the students, anyone that's involved with this system. We need a stakeholder survey.
I mean, I have so many questions. I'm confused. I thought that Jerome was hired because we needed help with Workday and because he was specific in knowing how to use Workday.
Well, let's get to the point where we get these questions answered. But first of all, we need to decide if we're gonna have another meeting, and if we are gonna have the tool that we're talking about, and have this done and have this ready to go for that next meeting.
When would we have would it be a couple hours before the next board meeting then, or what time, like half a day, like noon?
Go ahead.
A lot of public bodies do work sessions in conjunction with their regular meetings. So I would say, please, I would say that I would do it at the end, so do your regular business, have your meeting, and then adjourn out of the regular meeting into work session. That's the way most bodies do it.
Sure, they do.
Okay.
So, that way you're at the point where you've received the presentation. Now you want to ask questions. I mean, I'm just, a high level outline.
Right. And I think in justice to all of us, we do have a lot of questions that we need to have answered. And even the 5 of us that I don't remember half of the stuff. I don't even remember seeing some of the stuff that I was looking at for a scope document, for a statement of work. I don't remember seeing any of those,
I
Jerome.
just remember Dr. Farmer, Jim, you guys coming saying, we're on target for this, payroll's gone live, everything. But all of these other things that you all had access to, that you all had knowledge of, was not shared with us.
Right.
And we, as board members, we trust you. We trust you that you're the experts, that you're doing your job, that you're going to communicate, and that you're going to trust us. I don't feel we were trusted. I feel misled. I feel very misled.
Well,
and I don't want another meeting, honestly, but this is torture.
I feel that we have to have another meeting.
You can have one.
And we have to go through this process.
And I just have a concern because it's 9 o'clock at night now. Normally our meetings last until 8. Normally our regular board meetings last until about 8, 9 o'clock at night. I mean, last meeting, we were here till 10 just on our normal business. So we want to stop this meeting right now, add it to our regular meeting when it's going to be the same time that night.
No, but you have to understand, the last meeting, we dealt with Workday for over 45 minutes when we talked about bills. So if we consolidate what's going on in the agenda, and that will be up to Dr. Namuo and Dr. Farmer, if they consolidate and make sure that it's an easy agenda for us to go through, we've gone through meetings in a half an hour to 45 minutes.
Okay, well, let's just all make sure we're on the same page with that. Otherwise, we're going to be here till
But the
11 o'clock
workshop
that
can't
night
be
anyway.
at the end. Could the workshop, if we're gonna vote on those expense items and what.
We won't.
We won't.
We're gonna table
I'll pull
those.
it. I'm
Okay.
tabling.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I
We're
think,
talking about March.
right.
Could we possibly move the meeting up? Is that okay, like an hour or so?
I mean, don't most people here work until 5? I do. That's why I was late today. Because getting here by 5:30 can be troublesome sometimes.
I worked.
We can work to provide a more concise agenda. Chairman, I'll work with you on that.
Yeah. And Jerome, in follow-up to what Trustee Morales said, I kept drilling you on all of those things, and I don't think that we were shared enough information when I kept asking where we were at with the progress. And that really is bothering me a lot, because every time you were up on it and we were asking the status of where we were at with the situation.
We all agree we all agree we're not happy about.
No, I know.
this.
I'm just sharing with what she said.
I got you. I got you.
I'm done. I'm done.
We've heard, we know this is what's going on.
Got it.
And so let's find out, are we all good with this, having another meeting and working with this tool that Dr. Klein has.
What's the time frame for that? Do you know?
I'll find out.
You have to do, and
It's typically a 3-month process.
do we have to do an
but-
RFP on it?
Well, we want to follow all our procurement.
Because it'll be over the 25,000 mark, right?
Most likely,
Most likely.
So, okay.
most likely. So we'll explore procurement options and
Okay.
considering the timeline of the ERP implementation, we'll pursue all options.
You know, this turnover that we've said we've had, I don't think it's all because of Workday. I think it's a combination of the perfect storm. It's getting a new president, the uncertainty of staff that work here. Workday might have had something to do with it, but I wouldn't put all this on Workday, the turnover. And you know what? When you have employees that have been on the same system for 34 years, a lot of people don't like change, no matter what it is. So you could have put that other developer in and they still would have left. So I'm not going to put all of the staff turnover on Workday. And it's the great resignation. Everyone's looking for the bigger, better deal right now. So,
Right.
yeah.
And I don't want to see us.
Yes, the pandemic, exactly. Mhm.
Right. I don't want to throw the baby in with the bathwater.
Did we have another item on the agenda?
Anyway.
They would have left anyway.
And Dr. Farmer, can we still have a comparison, because I didn't see that in the presentation, of the costs of what was stated at the beginning and where Workday now is, because it seems like it's extremely higher than what the other presentations would have been with all the stuff that's been added at it.
All the
You following me?
positions that we've
I
had.
think-
So where are we at with cost? To
Yeah.
where they stated we said we would be, because that's why it was chosen for them versus.
Can we also
campus-
have a projection of what if they don't fix the problem in this next year and we give them the $2.5 million, what else, how much more money they're going to need to make this happen?
Well, that
Okay.
has to be, that has to.
Not a
part
problem.
of it.
And are we still eligible to see that survey that showed the failure of with the last implementation?
Repeat your question, please.
The survey that showed 85% not happy with the implementation.
So the last survey that we did for student phase 2.
Correct. Because you said there were several surveys that were done.
Yes,
The last survey is the one that I think we all should be able to see.
sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. So Trustee Mahalik is asking if I have a phone call or a meeting. Actually, representatives from Workday are coming here on February 9th. The head of the services division and then the head of the development division. That was one of the things my commitment to exert as much influence as possible to ensure a successful implementation. So they're coming to visit me. the
And they
morning
have
of
listened to
February
our
9th.
meetings, just so you know. They have
Yeah,
been listening
yeah.
to our meetings.
Thank you for that.
Right now, I know.
Thank you for that. I actually had a note to share that, so thank you.
February 9th?
February
February
9th.
9th.
Yeah,
Can I just clarify, Dr. Farmer and Dr. Moon, one point?
please.
So the $2.5 million, there's 5 or 6 items there, and I think Trustee Budzinski asked the question about the itemization of those, and we have provided those, happy to provide that. So the $2.5 million is not going to Workday. So I just want to make sure that we're clear about that.
It's still Workday related though, correct?
It's related to the project, certainly, yes.
A lot of it was AVAP, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, the AVAP implementation cost for the extension is about 1.25 million, I believe, of the 2.5.
And from that, what I just saw, we've already extended this due to COVID and due to, how many times had we extended this project already due to the thing, 2 or 3 times, was it?
Yeah, there was one time for the pandemic and then one time for the staff turnover.
One last question. Did they extend the contract to this extension since it's unforeseen? The finish date, they ever extend that due to the COVID and everything else?
I'm not sure I understand the question, Trustee
Like we had
Mahalik.
the deadline of 3 or
2029.
2 years going live, being complete. Did they ever extend it any more additional time in order to do the implementation, I guess, is technically?
No, we made a conscious decision based on the pandemic, the first time to extend by 3 months, and then due to staff transition to extend another 3 months, which aligned with the start of our fiscal year from HR and finance standpoint. So those were decisions that we made, not that.
That wasn't added on just to like the implementation, the original implementation deadline of the go live date, like everything should be completed. The 3 months and the 3 months was not added on.
No, there was not a second extension beyond those, no.
In regards.
And those change orders were done within the scope of the budget approved by the board.
In regards to the item that we're talking about that was on the last board meeting, what's the SLA time for the AVAP?
SLA time for,
Servicing level agreement. What's our servicing level agreement with them?
I guess it would depend on,
It should be stated 24/7 what?
it depends on what the issue is.
So there's an issue because after talking to all my IT people, it should be standard, either 24/7/4, 24/7/2. That needs to be addressed before we can even.
Well, part of the workday contract is we essentially get 24/7 by 365. So if that's the question.
That doesn't answer my question. 365 means it takes a year for them to get an answer.
No, 24/7 by 365 is year round.
Well, 24/7/4 is the hour time that it gets, they come back to us. Because we've heard that AVAP, that's why we had to go with the babysitter for Lisa Villalobos for HR because they didn't get back to her.
I think you're talking about AVAP's AMS post-go live support. We can follow up with the exact SLA times, but again, depending on the nature of the ticket that we issue, AVAP usually comes back to us and say it's going to take an hour to resolve that ticket, 4 hours to resolve that ticket. It's a little bit different than the support that we get from Workday on the product and the technology. There's a little bit of a nuance.
But if we're paying for support staff to be there versus whatever, we should have a definitive on what we're paying them almost $1 million for. And that's what's on the contract that's due on September of 2023. So I'm asking that because if he's going to have that on the agenda, we need to know that.
Trustee Broderick, that's a great question, and that is exactly something that IV&V would look at.
Good.
The third party would look at.
Okay.
All right.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Did you hear?